Good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive Tech Live on YouTube. Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday. Oh my God, January is already flying by, and boy, has this been one of the most exciting Januaries for Apple probably since 2007. Very rarely do we have this much stuff being announced, this much hardware being dropped. But yeah, we're kicking off today's stream. We talk about all kinds of things, but we always start off with what's in the title and thumbnail with basically something that I hate to kind of toot my own horn here, but I totally called it. Like, I said this in the M2 Mac video drop. I said, so, the M2 Mac Mini got a price reduction. That's great. That's awesome. But is it because the M2 chip is well known in the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro community for skimping out on the NANDs and deciding to, instead of having two 128 gig NANDs, you instead just move to one 256 gig NAND? Why does Apple do this? It's because it's cheaper, it saves them money, and it allows them to make production move a lot smoother because now you don't have to manufacture 128 gig NANDs anymore. For the 256 gig Mac, you just put in one single 256 gig NAND, and then for the 512 gig Macs, you can put in two 256 gig NANDs, or at least that's how it works in theory. But now the plot is thickening a bit because not only has Apple done that with the M2 Mac Mini, which I predicted this is likely because Apple, at least if they're going to worsen the read and write speeds, at least pass on that savings to the consumer. Can we really complain that much if it's being sold at a lower price, especially with inflation the way it is? Yes, Frank, I can see your messages. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Herring. Did I make it live this time? Dang, I wish Frank was here. Well, if Frank's not here, we better end the stream. No, but I was like, okay. My defense of it, back when Apple first did this with the MacBook Air last year, was that, okay, it's a bit of a bummer, but ultimately I get why Apple did it. Like, obviously, it would be better if the read and write speed was at least the same as the previous generation MacBook, not worse. But the truth is, and I still stand by this statement, the type of people that would utilize the 256 gig storage option are much less likely to care about having lower read and write speed because you're not shipping that much. You're choosing a Mac intentionally that doesn't have that much storage. So you're probably not moving that much huge amounts of data onto your drive because you picked the smallest storage space available. So for $600 or $500 through education for the M2 Mac Mini, yeah, I don't really think it's that bad a deal. Like, sure, the read and write speed's a little bit worse, but is that market really going to care? Probably not so much. But that's not the full piece of the equation. I have to continue falling back on Apple Certified Refurbished, and I know that Certified Refurbished is not available in every country. Most of my viewers are from the US, so that's why I bring it up the most. But even if you're not in the United States, the secondhand market, generally speaking, whether you're in Europe or Asia or wherever, generally buying secondhand products tends to be cheaper. And you can get those through Amazon, you can get those through eBay, or through whatever stores are available in your region. Typically, if it's an older model with an M1 Pro chip instead of an M2 Pro chip, they tend to charge less for those. So I don't know exactly what the price difference is, but my point is, if you're buying the M2 version of something, you're probably paying more than what you could buy a very similarly spec'd M1 Mac Mini for less. Like, for example, I'm still able to find M1 Mac Minis on the Apple Certified Refurbished page, which I can bring up for you guys now, $469 for the M1 chip. So in some circumstances, yes, the M1 chip is slower than the M2, but in others, like the read and write speed, the M1 is actually a bit faster. And this costs less money. Oh no, that one, someone already took it before I could get to it. They sell out quick. Sometimes they're not in here, sometimes they are. But yeah, it probably just needs to be refreshed. Sometimes, yeah, see, it's already, let me try again. No, that's just a dead link. That's funny. It was working literally just a second ago, but someone must have bought it. But still, like, my point is, it's something to be aware of if you're deciding, like, should I spend the extra money on the M2? Because a lot of people want to get the M2 variant of something because it's like, well, that one's faster, that one's newer. It's like, well, in some ways it's faster, in other ways it's slower. So is that extra premium you're paying really worth it if it's kind of a toss-up depending on the use case of when it's faster? Depending on what you're doing, read and write speed might be important, it might not be important, it just depends on the use case, and I can't have a one-size-fits-all answer for all of you because all of your use cases are different, but not sure why you'd save $30 just to get an M1 Mac Mini instead of M2. You'd get faster SSD because the M2 Mac Mini, I guess, has a single NAND and the M1 Mac Mini has two for the base model. So would you rather have $30 in faster SSDs or have a newer chip that is occasionally faster but also sometimes slower? It's up to you. M1 was a much bigger step up than M2. And I personally don't think that the price, the speed difference in real world outcomes is that drastic. But Chris Norton says, what are we talking about? So we're talking about how Apple is compromising basically on the chips, the storage chips. I'm sorry I don't use the term, I try to not use the term solid state drive, even though I put that in the title, I know. But I thought that was simpler than saying NANDs. If you have 256, the slow SSD doesn't really make a big difference. Yeah, but I'd also argue the M2 chip doesn't really make a big difference. So you got to pick and choose your arguments of that doesn't really make a big impact. And in my experience, M2 versus M1 doesn't make a huge impact. But yeah, now let's talk about the second half of the title. People are discovering, this was a 9to5 Mac discovery in the teardowns. This one I start to have less tolerance for. So 256 gigs is a pretty small drive, right? And having a lower read and write speed isn't that big of a difference. But now Apple is actually expanding the single NAND approach instead of two NANDs to the M2 Pro MacBook Pros. The $2,000 MacBooks that are specifically catered towards people that want more performance and more power. And those ship with 512 gigs by default. So again, this was spotted by 9to5 Mac. This is the read and write speeds for the M1 Pro MacBooks, maxing out around 4,900 megabits per second, and the write speed 3,950 megabits per second. And now on the newer and just launched, as of today, you can pick it up in store. The read and write is just a little bit lower at 3,100 versus 39. But I mean, hey, that's close to like a 20% lower write speed. And then the read speed is quite a bit lower. Went from 4,900 to 2,900. That's closer to a 15 or no, that's closer to like a 30% reduction. Sorry, I'm a dropout. I can't do instant proportions. But they actually did a teardown for the sake of seeing if this was true, because a lot of people were speculating on this, and it ends up being accurate. So 9to5 Mac took apart their M2 Pro MacBook Pro and only have one NAND. Now there's just an empty one if you buy the base model. And I assume if you opt for the 1 terabyte, then you'll have two. So this does simplify manufacturing for Apple, but now I feel like the argument doesn't hold up as well. Like, sure, I could maybe give it a pass for, it's not ideal, but I don't think that many people will care for a $600 or $500 Mac Mini, or if you're buying a MacBook Air, you're intentionally buying a Mac that's thinner and lighter and cheaper, so read and write speed may not matter all that much. But when we're talking about a $2,000 MacBook Pro, I think people going for the 512 gig option is a lot more common. That's pretty consistent because a lot of people can live with 512. I obviously was the moron that went with 8 terabytes, but I could see a ton of people justifying it in their heads. 512, I can get by with that. And the likelihood of someone caring about read and write speed goes up a lot more with a $2,000 or even $2,500. It's pretty much guaranteed at this point. We don't have a teardown confirmation yet, but makes perfect sense in my head. If they're willing to go with a single NAND on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, they're probably willing to go with a single NAND on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So we're talking about $2,000, $2,500 laptops with worse read and write speed than the MacBooks they're replacing. The good news here is that the secondhand market does exist and certified refurbished does exist. And just like how I did a video on it last week, you can find M1 Pro MacBooks now for $500 cheaper or more on average than the new M2 versions. And sure, yeah, the new ones are going to have HDMI 2.1 if you really need 8K. They're going to have Wi-Fi 6E if you really want Wi-Fi 6E. But now we can no longer say like they're faster in every way. No, there's actually some examples of when it's slower than its predecessor. So would you rather, if we're talking about like, okay, before it's semantics, if we're comparing M1 Mac Mini refurbished for $470, and then you can buy an M2 Mac Mini new for $600, or if you can get education, it's $500. So okay, you save $30 or you save $100 here by going with last year's model. M1 chip in certain circumstances is slower than M2, but in read and write, the M1 has the advantage. And now we're talking about $500 of savings, and you get a faster read and write speed with those base model options. That's when it's like, even more so, I don't recommend the M2 Pro MacBooks. At least the base model, I have a hard time justifying. It's like, if you're the type of person, because I've seen this in our Discord. Thank you, AJ, for the super chat. He says the M2 Pro base model SSD similars to the SSD speed on the 2019 MacBook models. Okay. So as long as it's similar to what we had in 2019, that makes it okay. My point is it's slower than a cheaper Mac. There's a Mac with a chip that's almost identical to the M2 Pro that will save you $500. So would you rather have a faster SSD and $500 or a slower SSD and no $500? We have to talk about these things. We can't just say, well, it's basically the same as 4 years ago. Like, that doesn't make it okay. The secondhand market exists. The M1 Pro Max exists. If those were all wiped off the face of the earth, maybe you'd have a point, but they're around. They're still there. Assuming that if 512 is slower because it uses less NANDs, does that mean the 1 terabyte is faster than the M1 Pro / Max? I would assume at least the same, because I'm pretty sure the 1 terabyte models are going to have 2 NANDs. But this is kind of breaking news today as this is happening. The read speed, like Marngel is saying here, the read speed of the M2 Pro is similar to the read speed of the M1 MacBook Air, which is ridiculous for a Pro device. I agree. You don't get that, well, they probably won't care argument when you start cutting corners in $2,000 or $2,500 MacBooks. That's different than when you're cutting corners in like $1,000 MacBooks or $600 Mac Minis. It's like, yeah, those people just want a Mac. They're not looking for cutting edge hardware or like next generation, like fastest possible everything. But the discussions I've had with the people in both the Discord and the comment section and stuff about people that are like, no, I won't go with the M1 Pro. I need the M2 Pro. I need the M2 Max. I need those chips. I need those newest ones, is because you just want to future-proof it. You know, you just want to make sure you're getting the latest and greatest. But ironically, this is not the greatest. It's the latest, but that doesn't necessarily make it better in every situation. There's a lot of situations where it's better, but it's compromised in others. And I'm like, okay, are you going to put up with slower read and write speeds because you bought this and you're hoping to get 10 plus years of software support, and you're worried that the M1 Pro won't give you 10 plus years of software support? Personally, I think it will, but that's all speculation. We don't know how long Apple's going to support 5 nanometer chips. It could be another 10 years. It could be 5 years. It could be 20 years. Who knows? It's not, I wouldn't say it's pointless cost cutting, but it's unnecessary. It's unjustified, I think is the word for it. Like, there is a point to this. It does help Apple build the MacBooks faster. It does make them more profitable. It's just not a point that goes to the consumer. It is a point for Apple. Apple's probably really grateful that they can get away with this, and there's probably going to be a bunch of people that buy it and don't even care, don't even notice, and Apple gets to collect the margins on that. So that's the point. It's just not in our favor. I agree it's not a big deal for the M1 or M2 base devices, but when you add Pro in the name, it should be fast in every way possible. Well, I think we could at least agree it should be better than the previous generation. When you start compromising from generation to generation, but you can still buy the last generation, which is still really, really good, that's when I'm like, yeah, definitely, if you're in the market for this kind of laptop, get a M1 Pro, get an M1 Max MacBooks. You're going to be able to spend way less or the same amount of money, and okay, it doesn't have HDMI 2.1, it doesn't have Wi-Fi 6E, your exports might take a little bit longer, it might take a couple minutes longer, but genuinely, I don't think there's that many people that are like that financial that have that much to financially gain from an export test. You know, like how many videos are you pumping out a day that like being able to export a video in 4 minutes instead of 5 minutes is going to justify spending an extra $500? Some of you, yeah, if you're like a professional videographer or you're making a crazy amount of YouTube videos, maybe like I am, I feel like my demographic, which is very niche, I don't think I'm most people, we can kind of justify dropping several $1,000s. We're not buying the base models either. It's like when every second counts, you're buying the M1 Max versions. You know, you're spending big money, but the number of people that can justify that expense is probably not that high. Most people I know, if they are doing video editing, they're posting maybe one video every other day or maybe one video a week, depending on their use case, especially with videographers. And the M1 Pro and M1 Max are still very fast, very capable chips that can still get the job done. It just might take a little bit longer. And now with read and write speed being a use case that comes up a lot, like when you record things and you're importing them and you're copying files and dragging files over, that comes up a lot. Now the M1 Pro has the advantage over the M2 Pro. So, like, okay, you get some advantages in the export, but you get some disadvantages in the file transfer. That's what that's why I'm like, yeah, should you, but basically when people ask me or they're debating is the new M2 MacBook Pro worth it, I'm like, you're asking if you should spend the extra $500, and I have a hard time justifying it. Like, if you have to ask the question, probably not. If you absolutely need HDMI 2.1 or Wi-Fi 6E, or you need every last second to export at the fastest possible speed, you're not asking. You don't need my opinion. You have already made up your mind. You're already buying it, you know. Sammy Jammy says, having faster SSD is important even if you don't use it. Makes for faster resale in the private market for those who desire it. That's true. AJ says, so supply chain or other real-world economic problems that affecting Apple is unacceptable. I know you're being sarcastic, but my point is manufacturing lines are going back to normal. I don't think we can consistently use the excuse of chip shortage when these factories online, you know, they just figured out the iPhone 14 Pro assembly lines, and what was affecting iPhone 14 production was more so worker protests about the regulations. It wasn't so much about there being a chip shortage. So my point is they were manufacturing this for several years, and it was working. Apple just wanted thicker margins. And this does help Apple have thicker margins, but we're not getting, it's not a supply chain problem. I agree. Like, you can't use that argument for 3+ years when things are open and production's back to normal and that kind of stuff. I actually did, Oliver, I just recently started using photographic styles, and I found that the rich contrast style is way more to my liking than the default style. I just thought photographic styles were just a gimmicky way to say filters, but now I've started using it. I'm like, oh wait, these are really good. Let's see. CC says, I'm hearing differing information from different sources regarding the SSDs. Apple Insider saying that the SSDs in the new MacBook Pros are faster than the M1s. Well, I think it depends on which trim you get, but I mean, I feel like, let me show you. I feel like this thing is harder, this type of thing is harder to fake. You know, someone tore one down. I don't know what Apple Insider is saying. I can look that up. But 9to5Mac opened up their brand new M2 Pro MacBook Pro, and they can, you know, it's not a mystery what the NANDs look like, and we know where they are. It's clearly missing, and they did a comparison test between the M1 Pro and M2 Pro, and this was the results. This is kind of objective research, in my opinion, but let's check out what Apple Insider said. Let's see. M2 Pro and MacBook Pro offer. Let's see. Are they saying if it's the base model or not? Because that would impact the test. If you bought a 1 terabyte model or a 2 terabyte model, that would absolutely improve your read and write speed. But yeah, I can't tell. SSDs used in M2 Pro Max equips MacBook Pros write faster than the predecessor. I don't see them specifying. This is just, I did a speed test, and it turned out in this one's favor. This is like I opened up the MacBook Pro, and it's what I thought. Correct me if they specified it somewhere in here, but I don't see them listing which Mac they tested. That would be a confliction. If they said we tested the base model SSD and it was faster than the old model, then I'd be confused, but that's not what they're saying. This to me sounds like they bought a higher trim version because that one would get faster NANDs, I would assume. So, I'm curious. Let's see. Did I upgrade from Intel as $1 Snake? Yeah, I mean, like, going from Intel to M1 Pro is still going to be a massive jump, in my view. Let's see. What is the worst and best deal? iPhone 14 Plus, iPad 10, or Tailosive Tech Ultra? Definitely Tailosive Tech Ultra, absolutely. Let's see. The only reason I'd get the M2 Pro MacBooks is for HDMI 2.1 for 4K at 120 hertz, but it's not worth the extra $500. I should make something clear. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Thunderbolt on the M1 Pro MacBooks, that can do 4K at 120. HDMI 2.1 enables 4K at 240 hertz. So my MacBook Pro, even though I didn't get the M2 Pro or M2 Max chip, my MacBook Pro can handle 4K at 120, just not through the HDMI port. But that's just, you just got to buy a different cable. That's not buying a whole new MacBook. Let's see. I'm assuming since the 512 is only 20 to 30% slower with less NANDs, that means the 1 terabyte should be faster since it's now using 2 faster NANDs. Yeah, the higher storage options should be improved. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise. The faster chip results in faster speed. That's how it should work. What's concerning is when there's $2,000 or $2,500 MacBooks that are boasting about being faster than the predecessor and they actually end up being slower. That's the concerning part. Now that we have far better processor / graphics, I kind of want the Aqua style. Really? Remember, if you already suck at video editing, you'll still suck, but with these new products, you'll suck faster. Yes, wise words spoken by Marquez, I believe. Let's see. 2 years between MacBook Pro makes more sense. MacBook Pros are intended to last more than 5 years anyway. If they can't actually afford to churn out yearly upgrades, they shouldn't do it. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, if you're going to compromise the read and write speed, why bother updating them? But that kind of explains why they're dropping them in January. I mean, there definitely were... I mean, there wasn't a ton of people... people are saying HDMI 2.1 is 48 gigabits, which means it can do full color 4K at 120. Are people getting this technical? I mean, can you not do full color with Thunderbolt? Do we know if full color 4K 120... How many specs are we going to have to require with this thing? It's just an HDMI cable. How much do you care? Does that require the full 48 gigabits per second? That's the problem, is I'm seeing people say 4K at 120, and I'm like, that's doable over Thunderbolt. There might be a specific version of 4K at 120 that can't be done over Thunderbolt, but that's, I feel like not what the debate is about. But there's certainly people that want HDMI 2.1 for that specific reason, or there's people that want Wi-Fi 6E, and updating the MacBooks whenever you can, even if you're not trying to say that everybody should buy this new MacBook Pro. I think it's important to note that this is nothing that's really changed. Apple did minor spec bumps with Intel and AMD back in the day, and now they're doing minor spec bumps with Apple Silicon. The point is, when there's something available and they can ship it, that doesn't necessarily mean they expect everyone to upgrade to it, but to make it available for those who care about it is nice. So you make sure that if someone is coming to the Apple Store and buying a new MacBook Pro, they're getting technology that's the latest and greatest, right? But if you just said, well, Wi-Fi 6E and HDMI 2.1, that's not a big upgrade, and the M2 chip isn't that much faster, let's just push it off. Now you've got people spending $2,000 or $2,500 on technology that's 2 years old instead of, a couple months old like we have today. So I get why they do the minor spec bumps, and I don't think Apple's really expecting people to upgrade from the M1 Pro or M1 Max. I don't think that's their point that they're trying to make, but the question does remain, like, if you're going to compromise in certain regions with things like read and write speed, like, you're winning some and you're losing some by doing that kind of thing. But I guess their logic with it is like, well, like AJ was saying earlier, if you're upgrading from a 2019 MacBook Pro, then the read and write speed is the same. So I guess the market is, if you're upgrading from a 2019 MacBook Pro, but you really want Wi-Fi 6E and HDMI 2.1, basically it's like, don't try to use the argument that it's because the chip is faster. Because sometimes it's faster, yes, but other times it's slower. So it's like, if you're coming from a 2019 MacBook Pro, but you really want tech specky things like 6E and HDMI 2.1, then okay, you've got an option now. But if you're not in dire need of those things, then you're probably going to save yourself some money and have way better value by just getting an M1 Pro MacBook, which I still recommend. Yeah. Anyone know if HDMI 2.1 can do 6K at 120? I'm not sure exactly. I bet it could. Yeah, probably close, if not. Yes. But 8K at 60, I feel like people forget how many pixels that is. An 8K resolution at 60 frames a second, that's a lot of data. So when you go down to 6K, you can definitely handle that at a higher frame rate. But let's see. Really, a decent Thunderbolt dock solves a lot of issues that people have between price points other than storage. That's true. Let's see. It's 4K 120 hertz from Thunderbolt 4 to DisplayPort. Yeah. Let's see. Matt Sloop, thank you. This is off topic. If the iPhone mini had identical specs to the Pro Max, including battery life, and the only difference was screen size and form factor, and your current phone no longer worked, so you had to buy... Oh my gosh. This is a very specific... You had to buy something, which would you pick? I'm curious which size you prefer. I realize this is totally hypothetical. Yeah, I guess if the only difference was screen size and form factor, I would fall back to the cheaper one, which I assume would be the screen size, the smaller one. If it wasn't the same, if it was the same price for Mini or Max, I don't know. I could be happy with either. That would make it a really hard call. But typically, if I'm on the fence about something, I lean towards the cheaper model because I'm like, well, at the end of the day, you'll have more money if you're torn between two things and you can think of pros and cons with going with either. Fall back on the cheap one because then you'll have money at least, and then you can use that money with whatever. Is your MacBook capable of 4K at 120 for a monitor? My Mac Mini can't do that. I'm pretty sure Thunderbolt can do that. Someone is saying that it's not at full color, so there might be some like HDR mode at 4K 120. But how many people are doing both? Thank you, Visualizer, for 14 months of support. How are you? I'm doing well. But I think we've kind of made our case for why we're okay with the compromised read and write speeds on the M2 Mac Mini, because the price is lower and it's an entry-level product, so that and it's a 256 gig Mac, so the read and write speed isn't going to matter all that much to people. But I think most of us agree the slower read and write speed of the M2 Pro MacBooks makes it a lot harder to recommend when the M1 Pro MacBooks exist refurbished and secondhand for $300 to $500 cheaper. You can save a lot of money and get a faster SSD. That seems like the better deal if you can find it, but we're kind of moving on from that now, and we have some other Tailosive Tech Pro supporters that can ask questions. So this is one of the perks of supporting via Tailosive Tech Pro. Even if you're not available, you can ask a question on a community post that only Pro members get to see, and I will address them in the stream. So let's take a look. Marngel has a big one here. We'll get to everybody, though. He says, I know you said that you'll talk about older, used, refurbished tech for the foreseeable future. I think he meant in. I would say in, yes. So will you buy and review them in return, of course, at some point and see if they actually aged as well as you think it has? It would be interesting to actually see you use that budgeted ecosystem you talked about in your video a few weeks back. So the short answer to that, Marngel, is yes. There's a longer answer about I'm not entirely sure if I just want to buy a bunch of stuff on eBay, but I do want to review older tech, and I have more plans and more announcements of how I'm going to do that in the future, and more to come, but the short answer is yes, I want to review older stuff. But not like, super old stuff that no one is using anymore. I'm not talking about reviewing the G4 iMac or I'm not talking about reviewing the original iPhone, using the original iPhone in 2023. That's more like history museum type of looking back. I'm more so looking into making content about tech that still works and that you can still live with today, but is just substantially cheaper. Because my focus is going to be more on how do we, cover content, cover tech products that are still usable in today's world, and you can buy them for way cheaper than the new stuff coming out. And then number 2, Margel says, with YouTube changing up the monetization related to shorts, have you thought of doing more shorts on the main channel? I know you upload the skits in short form on a different channel. Slight correction, I do not do that. Model Y Mike does that from the podcast, which I'm very grateful for. So if you haven't heard of it, Tailosive Shorts basically condenses the skits into 60-second or less little shorts, and he adds little memes and cutaway shots and stuff, which are great, and I'm very grateful that he does that. But he says, why not upload them into the tech channel to get more views for them? So that's a good question. I'll address the other questions too, but this one takes kind of a second to explain. Oh, and Matt Sloop, thank you for the super chat. He said, thanks for answering. You're welcome. Thank you for donating. So basically, YouTube is going to turn on, they're actually forcing us, essentially, to sign these new monetization terms where starting February 1st, you're going to be able to make money through YouTube Shorts, which I'm still kind of confused by because, there's certain shorts that I've posted that don't make any money, but there's other shorts that still do somehow generate ad revenue. I don't know what's exactly going to change, but I guess they're going to make it more clear on February 1st how monetization works with shorts. And based on the fundamental ways I know monetization works, I know that short form content will never be as profitable as longer form content. Because the way shorts works is there's rarely you see a thumbnail and you click on it. There's ads that play in between the shorts, but how do you disperse that ad revenue when opposed to today's system with longer form content? You see a thumbnail, you click on the video, an ad plays, and then you sit through the ad or you skip the ad, and now they know, okay, that ad revenue that advertiser paid for goes to that uploader. That makes sense to me. The short form content doesn't work the same way, and because it's inherently shorter by design, the ad revenue will not be as monetizable. So I will experiment with it, with posting more shorts on the main channel and just seeing how they perform. And I'm not a views guy. I don't care if, oh my god, the shorts are getting millions of views, this is so high. I don't care about views per se, but I'm more so looking at is this worth my time if it's going to result in content that I can't say as much as I want to say. That's part of the reason I do live streams, is because I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of different topics, and I struggle to condense them down into 60-second little bites. I know that's what some people might find more digestible, but then in my opinion, there's a lot lost in that. There's a lot of unique perspectives and unique opinions that you don't get to dive into when you're forced to condense it down. There's advantages to doing shorts, I know, but I think there's also disadvantages to it. And there's highlights and details that I like diving into with longer form videos. So I would imagine that shorts will probably get a lot more views because inherently people can watch a lot more shorts than they can longer form videos, and you just kind of swipe through them like you do on TikTok. So when you upload shorts, you'll probably rack up views very, very fast compared to if you were just uploading normal videos that were over a minute. And you'll be happy that you're getting more views, but it won't necessarily translate to ad revenue that you can do much with, which is what I'm hesitant towards. Not that I'm trying to say everything's about money, but if you just restructure your whole YouTube channel to making shorts because those get a lot of views, you could end up making way less money than you did before, and now you can't prioritize the channel as much, or you gotta do more sponsored videos because you can't pay the bills anymore because of how monetization inherently works. So I'll experiment with it, but I'm not planning on, ultimately, I think some people like the shorts, and if you really like the skits in short form, there's a channel and you can subscribe to that, and you can subscribe to both shorts and Tailosive Tech, and now you'll get the best of both. But the whole purpose of the Tailosive network was to let people pick and choose what content they wanted from me. If you wanted any and all content from me, you could subscribe to all the channels. If you just wanted tech videos from me, you could just subscribe to tech. So in the same way, I'm like, okay, if you just want the shorts, you can watch Tailosive Shorts. If you want shorts and tech, you can subscribe to both. but trying to kind of force shorts and tech videos on everybody because I know a lot of people don't like the skits, but my compromise for that was the chapter option. You can skip straight to the commentary to get right to the part of the video where I'm just talking. Um, so yeah, I don't have. I'll toy around with it and see how it works, but based on what I've seen with TikTok and how ad revenue works there, I don't think it's going to be very profitable. But it'll make you happy if you like just getting lots of views. If a bunch of views is what your goal is, then shorts will probably be much, much better for you. Um, let's see. Joshua Miller says it's literally just TikTok without this severe security issues. Pretty much, but it's still Google, so there's still some security issues. Uh, but yeah, my goal isn't necessarily to answer Marngel's question. My goal is not to just get the most amount of views possible. My goal is to create content that's, honest and straightforward, and you don't get more than what you asked for, essentially. And I already feel like I'm pushing a lot of people's buttons by doing the skits and the regular tech videos as is. So if I post them a second time as shorts, I don't know. I feel like that's a bit too pushy. And I also think that I can do more with shorts than just clipping the skits. So I'll probably mess around with that. If there's a video idea or a subject that I could think of and I'm like, this wouldn't really be good for a full-on video, but it could be good for a 60-second little clip, then I'll post that. But my guess is that the monetization is not going to be very good. At least it isn't on TikTok. Like, people were getting like 4 million, something like millions of views, and it translated to like $4. So I don't know how YouTube is exactly going to beat that, because TikTok kind of invented this formula, and if not invented, they at least mainstreamed it and made it popular and took away a huge amount of watch time from YouTube. So yeah. Anyway, Alpha says, if Apple can price drop the Mac Mini despite the economic climate, would Apple possibly price drop other products despite inflation and other factors? It's still possible. I just don't think it's a good expectation to go into. Like, sometimes Apple surprises us. Like, still, I think about the iPhone 11 being a huge surprise. It got night mode, it got a faster processor, it got an ultra-wide lens, it got better battery life, and they dropped $50 off the price year over year from the 10R to 11. And the 10R was already selling really great, so I don't even think they really needed to drop the price, but they did anyway, just to kind of maintain market share. So there's a chance they could do something like that this year and maybe start the iPhone 15 Plus cheaper than the 14 Plus so that it sells better or something. But I don't like going into events or announcements setting false hope or false expectations. I try to keep it real and keep it honest, and just try to be like, okay, is that likely to happen? Probably not. So I think it's always best to lean on the side of caution and just assume prices are probably going to stay the same or get worse. And if I'm wrong, then great. I'd be happily wrong in that case. And that was the situation with the M2 Mac Mini. Hey, this actually ended up being cheaper than we thought. Great. But then now with the M2 read and write speeds being revealed, it's like, oh, so it's not better in every way. So therefore, okay, expectations were realistic. And then Makima says, Apple features that look/sound very cool but don't really matter. For example, recording ProRes on iPhone. I don't know how this is a question, Makima, but yeah, personally, I feel like ProRes is a good example of that. In my view, just a lot of camera features are mostly like Smart HDR4, Smart HDR3, Smart HDR2. Like a lot of that stuff is like how much to Pro RAW or higher megapixel counts and that kind of thing. Does that genuinely translate into like noticeably better pictures, or are they only better if you look at them in the native Photos app and zoom in as hard as you can? Then you can see a difference. I'm like, how often are you actually doing that compared to just throwing it up on social media, and social media compresses the crap out of it anyway? Like, I still see a lot of people that post photos on Instagram or on Discord or what have you that are from old iPhones. They'll post pictures from the iPhone 11 or 10s or even the 10, and they still look great. And you can't tell. I could post a picture from an iPhone 10 and you wouldn't be able to tell that it's from a 5 or 6 year old phone. You would still think, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And I could probably tell you that it was shot on iPhone 14 and you'd believe me. So the fact that it's so difficult to know in my view, is like, yeah, it's, I mean, every year Apple talks more and more about the camera performance, and I think we're very much at a point of basically uh, uh, limiting, what's it called? Diminishing returns. That's the term. And that's why I think that most of the time the new iPhones aren't necessarily worth it. You know, Dynamic Island was impressive and kind of last second and kind of cool. Um, but I didn't find myself using it all that much. Like when it's doing something, it's nice, but the way I use my phone, it's usually not doing anything, and that's why I got bored with it. But thank you for upgrading your membership e-uploads to Tailosive Tech Pro. I've already finished the next tech video, so your name will not be in the credits of the next one, just to be clear, but it will be in the credits of the following tech video, so stay tuned for that. Um, let's see. E-Upload says, personally, not a fan of shorts, prefer longer and more in-depth videos. I've messed around. I've watched some shorts sometimes, and I think there's a place for them, but I don't think they replace the need for long form. Um, but yeah, I think people are hyping up this short monetization thing in their head like it's going to suddenly unlock this use case, and I'm like, I don't think you're going to make very much off shorts unless you get millions and millions of views on each one. Elizabeth said, Sarah Dietschy said on the Genius Bar podcast that shorts drive views to the long form content without the shorts views dropped on the long videos. I'm sure there's runoff, but the point is you need both. You can't you can't just do shorts, and maybe you can't just do long form. It's funny that long form is like 5 minutes now. That's long form content, a 5-minute YouTube video. Jacob says, I have an iPhone 10 and 14 Pro Max, and I can definitely see a huge difference in camera performance, especially indoors. If you're doing a side-by-side comparison, absolutely. I'm talking about if you take a picture and post it on social media and ask people, what camera was this shot on? 95% of the guesses are going to be wrong. And that's what ultimately matters. Whether or not you can spot the difference between two phones, that's not a use case that comes up. That's not a comment. Like, are you going to take a picture and someone's going to be like, oh my God, did you shoot that on an iPhone 12 or an iPhone 14? That really looks like a shot off an iPhone 12. Honestly, like Randy said on the last podcast, and I was experiencing this when I reviewed the 14 Pro, that there were several instances that my wife even picked up on, and she's not a techie person. You know, she's still using an iPhone SE2. She's not a pixel peep or anything. But I took several shots on the 14 Pro when I first got it. And it was just straight out of the native camera app. I didn't do Pro Raw or anything. And I showed them to her, and she was like, what's wrong with this picture? I was like, I don't know. Something's off with the color. Something's off with the post-processing. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. It was the color science. It was the saturation. But my point is, it's all up to how you edit it after the fact and how social media compresses the crap out of it anyway. Like, to me, that just... like most people don't care is I guess what I'm trying to say. And you can choose to care if you want because you find it interesting or you find it exciting, but it's just kind of luck of the draw basically with how the computational chip in your iPhone is going to turn out an image. And there's new phones that can still take pretty terrible pictures, and there's old phones that can still take pretty good pictures. It just kind of depends on the scenario and what photographic style you have it set to, where you're posting it, and how you edited it after the fact. And I'm like, there's so many variables that go into it. I'm just not of the belief that you need to spend $1,100 or $1,200 to take a good picture. If it's a phone, you know, you care about it a little bit to take a nice picture, but not enough to get a real camera, which a smartphone still can't compete with. So it's like, if it's not that important that you're not going to use a real camera, then any phone from the last couple years is going to be fine. Like Marngel said, I agree with Marngel. I think getting a better camera should not be the main reason to buy a new phone. I don't think it really is for most people, from what I've talked to. When I ran a poll on why people went with the 14 Pro over the 14, I thought better camera would be the main reason, but the winning out result was the better display. But I think most people are upgrading out of necessity from their old phone not working anymore, not because there's actually something they need on the new phone. They'll just take the new features because, cool, I need to get a new phone. I might as well have a nicer one. But I don't think that many people are upgrading purely because they saw a Pro RAW or they saw a 48 megapixel sensor and they're like, oh, I need that. It was more so their last phone is kind of dying on them and it's getting old and it's not holding up anymore. Like, at least anecdotally, most of the average consumers I talk to in my life, that's usually the situation. My old phone isn't doing so well. I guess I better get a new one. It's not, the new one looks so great, I'm going to upgrade to it, you know. IRL, thank you for the super chat. Do 512 gig M2 MacBook Airs now have slower SSDs too? I haven't seen evidence of that. I will keep you posted if I see a report, but as far as I'm aware, no. I don't think that they've switched to the single a slower when configured. Yeah, I'm looking at my Twitter feed right now, and I don't see any articles claiming that. So I guess the short answer is no. Let's see. What is it? My latest super chat. Sorry, where is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you got buried. My bad. Thank you, AJ, for the donation. He said, if the iPhone 15s have slower storage speed compared to the iPhone 13, 14, this will literally a criminal. Sorry, I forgot to read that. But it sounds like you forgot to read it too before you said it, because that doesn't make sense. But I appreciate the donation. No, I don't think it matters as much on phones because it's a phone. But you can't make that same argument when you're selling a $2,000 or $2,500 laptop. That's going to be used for more pro workflows. The iPhone is mostly going to be used for texting, taking pictures, and social media. So I don't think that you can't necessarily compare the read and write speed of the iPhone 15 to the $2,500 MacBooks. I feel like that's not a fair comparison. They're going after completely different markets. If a creator's short is viewed 1 million times, they're allocated 1% of the creator pool, or $900. The creator will earn 45% of that amount, which should be $405, YouTube explained. The creator pool is constantly changing, though, and I think that the new policy that we're all agreeing to is not structured the same way. So that pool is fluctuating, so that the price, I'm sure YouTube wants you to think it's a really good value, but I'll believe it when I see it. Let's see. 13 Pro moon photos and iPhone XS moon photos were about a 2 times detailed difference, which is noticeable without a sidebar side by side. If you're taking pictures of the moon, any smartphone is going to look terrible. I'm sorry. Like, I've not seen, even the space zoom on the Galaxy phones doesn't really take very good shots of the moon. Maybe it's because my uncle does, like, he has a telescope and he has cameras that he takes pictures of the moon and stuff. And I'm like, you don't care that much about it. I'm not going to say, if you want really good moon photos, you need an iPhone 13 Pro. No, sorry. I don't. It'll be a little bit better, but that's not worth spending a few extra $100 on through a telescope in the given photo. Yeah. Let's see. Been meaning to ask you, who do you refer to when you say, seriously, help us out a ton, don't you run the channel by yourself? Well, no, I feel like us is in everybody. Like, it helps out the people that watches the videos. Like, I do appreciate the people watching, even if they aren't supporting through a membership or through super chats. I don't expect you guys to do that. I hope you're aware of that. And I am fully confident that most people watching the channel will not subscribe or support directly, and I don't think that's a problem. Personally, I'm willing to admit I don't support any channels directly, but that's partly just because of my position as a content creator. I think it's weird when a lot of my income is dictated by fan funding or donations, so it'd be weird if I took those donations and then sent them to someone else. That feels a little bizarre to me, but I am trying to be as wise as I can with how our money is spent, and that's why me and my wife work really hard on not having any debt and not spending money on things that we don't necessarily need, and not blowing a bunch of money on and stuff, because we do appreciate you guys. And because of your guys' support, either through the memberships or through the super chats, I'm able to keep making content as regularly as I do. I can do many videos throughout the week and many live streams, and I have time for that. And I don't have to do sponsored videos. So in that way, it helps us out as the Tailosive Tech community as a whole, gets my attention, gets my work put into it, because you guys are supporting directly. So yeah, technically it goes to me, but also, like, I have expenses that don't just apply to me. I'm a married guy. We have joint bank account, and we make decisions as a couple. So it's us in many ways. It's not just it helps me out. It helps everybody out because especially if you like the channel and you're in a place in your life where you just don't feel comfortable supporting me directly, no problem. I don't take any issue with that. I don't blame you. So it helps out the people that aren't supporting to make sure that content keeps coming out regularly and that the revenue stays consistent even when the advertiser pool takes a dive like it normally does in January. So ad revenue and the CPMs aren't as good in January compared to December, but thanks to your guys' help and support, the income stays pretty consistent, and we can use that money towards paying the bills and keeping the lights on, and of course making more videos. Let's see. I donate to you through memberships, and I have 3 paying members for my channel. Is that awkward? No, it's your choice. It's your channel. It's your money. If a fan is supporting you, that means they trust you to use the money to whatever you want. I thought it'd be a little bit weird for me to do, but that's my choice. You can choose whatever you want to do. That's fine. Joshua says, I upgraded from 12 Pro Max to 14 Pro Max because of how many new things it had. The 13 Pro Max wasn't enough of an upgrade for me, but to be honest, the always on display in the 14 Pro Max got me. That's funny. See, that's the thing that annoyed me right away, and I turned it off immediately. Penn is saying, so you have to buy 1 terabyte SSD to get usual speeds. For the MacBook Pro, I believe so, yes. The new M2 MacBook Pros, which makes it much more expensive than getting a base model M1 Pro refurbished. Let's see. Yi Hirasawa says, you motivated me to not donate to anyone. Well, cool. Or, oh no, I guess. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. Let's see. Have you ever thought of switching to Android just temporarily? Well, I have switched to Android temporarily many times, and yes, I have in the past year debated doing it, but ultimately I've switched to Android many times, and my eyes are never opened. I never just see all this unlimited potential and real, oh my god, I can put the apps anywhere on the home screen. Oh my god, like I never have that moment where I'm suddenly like, wow, I really need this. I can get by. I don't hate Android. I've tested Android phones and I've been like, yeah, it's fine. It does phone things, and you can even do some more things than iOS can, like the split screen or what have you, little things like that. But I don't prefer it to iOS. I prefer the simplicity. I prefer the App Store. I prefer the ecosystem. I prefer just the UI, just the squircles and the design consistency of iOS. I feel like there's a lot of things people don't like about Android, but they have a hard time articulating it. They can't really put it into words what they don't like about it, and I'm guilty of this as well. Like I've used Android phones and just been like, there's something that's just off, and I can't tell what it is. And I think it's just the design inconsistencies, like a lot of apps being different shapes. And I've noticed in a lot of third-party apps, particularly on Android, which you get a lot of because a lot of the time you're buying it from OnePlus or Samsung or Google. Well, Google's usually better because that's first-party hardware and software. But with Samsung, it's like you're dealing with Galaxy UI choices and Google UI choices, and they kind of disagree with each other. And sometimes when you're using third-party apps, there's a certain amount of jumpiness where the animation doesn't feel as fluid and it doesn't feel as responsive as iOS does. And I've seen comparisons where people show like how quickly they can navigate iOS's UI, even though the animations aren't necessarily as fast as Android. Just the I think a lot of people were saying, even before ProMotion was a thing, the ability to register your finger at a touch sample rate of 120 hertz made it feel more immersive, and just the design overall feels more consistent with the hardware than most Android does. So it's a personal preference thing. It's not like Android is unusable because there's some UI inconsistencies that we stumble upon here and there. But yeah, it's like, even if the look of Android can be cheap, it's like you can still buy a really, like I've used $2,000 Android phones. Like the Galaxy Z Fold that I reviewed was more expensive than any iPhone I've ever used, but it still felt kind of cheap, despite being so pricey. Just because the UI doesn't feel like they have, that simplistic approach in mind. So it's just like you would pick a different. I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with Android. I know I have lots of friends and family members that use Android, and I never fault them for it. I never say, "Oh man, you need an iPhone." I never say that in the real world. Occasionally, I make jokes about it in the tech community, but that's just because I like pushing people's buttons sometimes. But in the real world, it's like, yeah, there's some great options and there's some great cameras, and I'm willing to admit that the best camera you can get in a smartphone is probably on an Android of some kind. In most of the side by side comparisons I've seen in the blind smartphone tests, the iPhone never wins. The iPhone always messes up something. I just don't think people care that much overall about the performance that they're willing to put phones side by side and choose Android over iOS for one slight different dynamic range approach by the processor. I don't think people care that much. I think we're kind of splitting hairs at that point. And people just like the simplicity. I love when you set up an iPhone how little there really is to do compared to an Android. Especially if you buy a Galaxy phone, they want you to sign into your Samsung account. They want you to sign into your Google account. And of course, Samsung phones have like a billion different toggles and options to choose from. So some people like having those options and all those choices and customizing it to the way they want. But Margel says you could get by with in respect to Android, but not Windows. That's just because I've personally had terrible experiences with Windows. It's very anecdotal. That is not a blanket statement for all Windows machines. I know there's a ton of people that use Windows exclusively and they're happy with it. And I actually have family friends that work at Microsoft and use Windows exclusively and they're very happy with it. And I get along with them fine and we get by. But I've just, for my lifestyle and for my workflow, Windows has been terrible anytime. On multiple machines I've tried to use it on. It's always gone horribly. So I tested Windows, or I tried to work or run my YouTube channel off of Windows machines on 3 separate instances at 3 different points in time. So I know it's not just, oh, I got one bad update, so I wrote off Windows forever. These were like years apart from each other. And every single time I had massive software problems and boot up problems and driver corruption problems. And after the 3rd strike, I was like, you're out. I can't do this anymore. For those who aren't aware, that's a baseball term. I don't watch baseball. But yeah, it was just like too many bad experiences for me to want to try it anymore. I was like, I gave Windows 3 separate chances to fit into my workflow and fit into my lifestyle. And it failed within weeks every single time. And I just don't have the time or interest in trying to fix it or trying to reboot it or reinstall the operating system like people were telling me. I feel like it's a pretty common thing in our tech channel. We've noticed during the members streams, a lot of people are like, yeah, I had this terrible experience with Windows. I had this terrible experience with Windows. And it's like, I'm sure not everyone has a terrible experience because it is like the most popular desktop operating system in the world. So clearly a lot of people have good experiences with it. I'm not denying those experiences. It's just the people that have bad ones are the more likely to switch to Macs. And because you're more likely on a Mac now, you're more likely to watch this channel. So the Tailosive Tech viewers are more likely to have bad Windows experiences than the everyday person, I guess. Canadian Games, thank you for the super chat. Thanks so much for your honesty and transparency. I'm new here, but was wondering what software you use to live stream. Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the donation. It's a free app that's optimized for Apple Silicon now, just called OBS. And there's no ads, and there's not like a unlock, purchase license that unlocks a bunch of other features. It's just a one-time download. You just search OBS for Mac, and it even works on Apple Silicon. And I'm using the microphones from my MacBook Pro, which are very good in my opinion, and I'm using my 13 Pro Max as a camera, and it's wireless. There's no wires coming out of the iPhone. This is just a wireless transmission to the MacBook. Let's see. How has macOS Ventura been for you? Any bugs compared to Monterey? Only bug that I still run into on a daily basis is AirDrop is not working very consistently. I can AirDrop things from my phone and iPad to the Mac, but I can't AirDrop things from the Mac to the iPhone or iPad. And I've tried restarting it and it didn't fix it. And I've had these kinds of issues with my iMac Pro before. Usually restarting it would fix it and didn't this time. So it's probably just a bug in this version, and hopefully I'll get an update soon and it'll fix it. But other than that, no. Universal control has been working very reliably. Battery life is still great, and other than I wish there was a charge limiter, but that's not a bug. That's just a feature request. Let's see. Remember you having issues with your webcam messing up on Windows for the gaming channel? Oh yeah, not just the webcam, but that was the crazy thing about that experience is I was like, okay, maybe for video editing I can keep using my Mac. This is what I tried back in, I think it was 2019. I was like, I'll do all of my video editing stuff on my Mac, but I will do all my gaming channel stuff on a PC because PCs are better at gaming, and I've always been willing to admit that. And I bought this PC, and it was not the fanciest PC in the world, but it had a decent GPU, and I wanted to stream games on it, and it worked for like 2 weeks. I could stream on it, and it wasn't $4,000 custom build, but it was capable of live streaming. Our internet was good. And I could plug in a webcam, and I could plug in my mic, and you could hear me and see me, and I could capture the gameplay, and it worked fine. And I did gaming streams for a couple weeks on that thing. And then after like 2 weeks, it got some update where I was ready to stream, and I walked in the office and I booted it up, and it was like, oh, updates are installing, and it took like an hour to install the updates. So I had to go do something else. And then when I came back, anytime the webcam was activated by OBS or by GeForce, whatever I was streaming with at the time, it's been so long I can't remember. Anytime the webcam was activated, the entire system crashed. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just stream without a webcam for a while. But then the microphone, after streaming for like 20 or 30 minutes, would suddenly drop the pitch of your voice and you'd sound like a monster. It was so weird. It wasn't a setting. It wasn't a configuration. Like, I tried so many things. And basically, I posted about it online. I was like, guys, like, this is ridiculous. Like, I sound like a monster. It was like super low. It's like, you could barely understand me. It was so distorted. And they were like, well, Drew, there's a corruption in the drivers. You just need to reinstall the entire operating system. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. I was like, my point was to get a quick, simple PC that could just play some games and stream them, and it couldn't even do that, and it didn't matter. I tried a different webcam. I was like, okay, this webcam doesn't work. Let me try a different one. That crashed the OS too, and even if I would have installed a fresh copy, how do I know they wouldn't have another driver corruption in the future? And I was just like, ugh. I can't do this anymore. So I was like, I just need something that's kind of what Apple is known for. Is it just works, and so it doesn't always work. Like Apple has problems too, and I complain about Apple a lot, probably more than any other brand on this channel. But in terms of Macs that just turn on, work, and edit videos, which is what I do for a living, this is what works best for me. Let's see. I still hate system settings. Literally everything is in the wrong place. I have to search for everything. I don't hate it as much as most people do. I kind of prefer it, to be honest. But Marngel says, Linus Tech Tips recently made a video showing us how to make Windows work properly, and after watching it, it makes me glad that I'm using Mac because I don't have to do any of that crap. Yeah, I don't envy the Windows people. I'll put it that way. Yeah, like Caleb said, everyone in the member stream had something bad to say about Windows. Joshua said Windows 7 was great and later Windows 10 versions were tolerable at best. The rest of Windows is garbage. I had no issues with Windows 7 when I had it. Let's see. Everyone on YouTube pretty much uses a Mac, it seems like. All content creators, at least. Well, most. Well, if you're watching Tailosive Tech, you're probably watching a lot of Mac, Apple-related YouTubers. There's a lot of channels that don't use Macs, but you're less likely to be watching those. It's no big deal. You just have to reinstall the entire OS to fix it. Yeah, right. Penn says, I had 4 Windows PC laptops in 5 years, and every time they had an issue. But after purchasing the MacBook Pro 15-inch, which was from mid-2015, it held 7 years, no problem, and was the best laptop who can run Windows. That's right, you could put Windows on it, huh? Yeah, that's similar experiences I've heard a lot of. And again, I'm not trying to say that everybody has a bad experience with Windows. I'm just saying the people that do are more likely to go to Mac. And we're a very Mac-focused channel, so that's why you're going to get a lot of people with bad Windows experiences in my audience. Let's see. Windows has been taking a bunch of L's and it's sucking nowadays with all the tracking bloat. From the people I've talked to, a lot of them at least, they don't use Windows because they like something that Windows has. It's more so that, well, it's not, let me phrase that differently. That Windows does. It's because they need a app or game or program that is only on Windows. And that is their necessary bridge that they have to cross to access certain software. They're like, well, my work requires me to use this program. That program's not on Windows. Or I want to play this game and that game is only on Windows. It's not on Mac. That's the most common example. I don't see that many people that are actively interested in here's a new change Microsoft made to the operating system. They're just like, nope, that's the platform that has what I need. And I feel that way kind of with Mac OS. Like I need Final Cut, which isn't on Windows, but we also still talk about new Mac OS features all the time, like what I'm using right now. Like continuity camera is really cool. We talk about AirDrop. We talk about iMessage and the FaceTime and the handoff features. And, you know, like you can just have you be browsing a website on your phone and a little pop-up shows up on the dock and you just click it and then it hands off that experience. And there's a lot of features baked into Mac OS itself that I see people appreciating and highlighting. And I don't see that as much in the Windows field. Um, let's see. I'm supposed to get a MacBook, but should I get an M1 Max or M2 Max? What do you recommend? I think Gnome 338, if you're asking the question, you should probably just get an M1 Max because that's going to be plenty fast and probably way cheaper, especially if you can buy it certified refurbished. The only people who should be getting the M2 Max are people that don't ask the question. The people that don't ask the question are the ones that know without a doubt, no questions asked, they need Wi-Fi 6E, they need HDMI 2.1, or they need the fastest possible chip in a laptop, and there's no debating it. Like, they absolutely can justify it. So there's a lot of people that are just like, absolutely, I need that, in which case you're not asking the question. So I would say get the cheaper one, which is the M1 Max. And that's what I'm using right now, and it's still holding up. Darn, only an M1 Max. I know it's funny that by the existence of the M2 Max, people think that the M1 Max is like compromising. That's like settle. Oh, I'll just get a cheaper M1. That's still an insanely powerful chip. That chip beats out a bunch of $10,000 Mac Pros can be beat out by the M1 Max chip, and people are like, it's only M1 Max, whatever. Um, let's see. Is there anything you wish Mac OS had that Windows has? Not really. I mean, game support. I wouldn't use it, but it would shut up a lot of people, I feel like. And the window snapping, I like that, where you just kind of drag a window to the side and then it takes up half the screen and the other. And now I'm going to get 800 comments saying, Drew, there's a Mac app you can download that automatically does that, just like when. Okay, great. I'm happy for it. You can use that. I don't want it that bad. Not much. In regards to, you noticed I've done an iOS wish list and I've done an iPadOS wish list. Haven't done a macOS wish list. I don't have a big list of things. It kind of works and it's functional and it gets the job done for me. The big thing I want is just a charge limiter, and that's pretty much it. So I keep asking for that year after year, but that's not really much of a list. And luckily, Al Dente is working for me right now, which is a Mac app that lets me limit the charge rate to 80%, which is better for the battery health because my MacBook is often plugged in for days, maybe weeks at a time. Like Indoctrinal said. Drew, there's a Mac app you can download. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. If Apple emailed you saying they want to send you new products early to review on your channel, would you do it? If I were you, I'd absolutely do it. I don't know anyone that wouldn't do it. It's like, Drew, if someone offered you $1 million, would you take it? No, because of the IRS tax brackets I would get stuck in. So that's a bad example. Yeah, I there would be a lot of follow-up questions. I mean, but my go-to answer is sure, yeah, why not take a early review unit? But I don't know if I'd agree to the terms because you have to sign a contract to do those embargo things. And in that contract, I I can't say everything. But let's just say that there are certain points and certain talking points that you have to stick to when you agree to those terms. You guys notice that when all the YouTubers drop their embargo early product reviews, that they all kind of flow the same way and they all kind of say the same things. It's because of the contract. it's because of what Apple wants you to say and kind of stick to a specific list of things. You can't get too critical, and if you do get too critical, you probably won't get embargo units in the future. So I don't know if I would want to agree to those terms, and I would probably ask them like, "Hey, if you're lifting the embargo at a certain time, like, can I go live at that time?" I think that would be kind of fun. Everyone drops these edited videos at the exact same time, and then you get 15 videos of the exact same thing, of everybody unboxing the exact same product, saying the exact same things. I think it gets kind of I think it gets kind of old. But imagine if we got to do a live unboxing of a product early. That would be kind of a nice mix up. Um, but yeah, I don't think that Apple would be okay with it. That's why all Apple reviewers sound the same. Yeah, because if you don't say what Apple wants, then they don't send you the product. So basically, when you review the new Macs, you have to be like, "This is really nice. It's good." Like, and then later on they do a more critical video. But for the embargo units, they basically make them as if Tim Cook himself is watching, and they have to be very careful with what words they say. Um, but yeah, I don't think Apple wants you to do that. What's my MacBook's battery health? I haven't checked it in a while. I'll look. Let's see. System, not settings. No, system information. You go to power and maximum capacity 92%. It's the same as my phone. It should not be that low, and that's mostly all Mac OS's fault. There's very little cycles on the MacBook. There's 60 cycles. 92% after 60 cycles is terrible. And I'm pretty sure that is purely because of the fact that Mac OS wants to charge the battery to 100% and leave it there at all times. But Drew, there's a Mac app that lets you break embargo. That's wonderful. Good job. I did not update my HomePod, no. Let's see. Mine is 91. Not sure if that's bad in 1 year. Well, it depends on how many cycles you have. Let's see. Is there a March event rumored at all? There is. It's kind of weird because like no one was really predicting that we would get new Macs and a new HomePod in January. That kind of came out of left field, so we're wondering like, is Apple gonna throw us more site refreshes in February, or is it just going to be more site refreshes in March, or is there going to be a dedicated event in March? But there's still a large number of people claiming that Apple's going to do a Apple Reality headset this March. I don't know if I believe them. It's really hard to follow the Apple headset rumors because they change and they keep pushing it back, and they've been claiming that it's going to come out for next year for the past 4 years, and it doesn't really go anywhere. You heard how you have a lower battery health than my M1 MacBook Air that is older and has more cycles. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because I left it plugged in. But ultimately, I don't care all that much because the battery life on my MacBook Pro is still absurdly good. It lasts an incredibly long time on a single charge. So even if my battery health was 80%, it could still get me through the day, no problem. So, Indoctral blames Al Dente. But my battery health has noticeably not deteriorated as quickly since Al Dente started working properly. Whereas before, Al Dente was buggy and it wasn't working, so I just didn't use it, and I just let the MacBook charge itself to 100%. And I waited for optimized battery charging to kick in, which would take months, and it would still do it wrong. So, yeah, my battery health, I feel very confident my battery health would be way, way better if macOS had a charge limiter built into it. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. I don't understand why Apple doesn't send you review units. There are other YouTubers with less subs and less. Have we talked about this before? I'm getting deja vu. I feel like we've discussed this like 8 billion times already. It is not based on sub count. It is not based on views. That's not how Apple selects people to be in their review unit program. We've known for years. It's not a new thing that there are channels with fairly little subscribers, at least less than mine, that get review units. It's based on your production value, how predictable you are, and if you will stick to a script and sign a contract. And my guess is my videos are too weird, or I talk too much about leaks, or my production value is not high enough. I don't care. I'm not trying to get on Apple's nice list. I let that ship sail years ago. Mostly because I know what you have to do to get on it, because I've talked to people on it. I won't say who, but I've discussed what is necessary, and I don't want to do what I would have to do to get on it. I don't think, to me, you just kind of blend in with the crowd. It's not like your channel's going to suddenly unlock and get this gigantic boost in performance because you upload the same video that 20 other channels upload at the exact same time. That's not going to do anything. So I don't care personally. The guy that pretends to be Tim Cook and Craig Federighi before the video begins, they're probably not going to send that guy a review unit. Or the guy that talks about how the new MacBook Pro isn't worth it and you should buy last year's model. They're not going to send review units to that guy. They want people that are going to stick to their script. And I'm not a scripted guy. I'm not predictable, yeah. If you're a very level-headed, very just unopinionated, straightforward, just I will read the specs, I will say what Apple basically already wrote on their website, then they will send you a review unit, and you just basically are free marketing department for Apple. You know, you're just, I'm going to film your product, I'm going to make it look good, and I'm going to state the facts. This computer has a screen, this computer has a new chip, this computer is like this. Like, if you just keep it really flat and keep it really boring, they'll send you stuff. But I would rather be entertaining and funny and wild and unpredictable than stick to Apple's scripts just so my channel can blend in with 30 other channels. Thank you, Christian Yu, for being a member for 16 months. Dave2D said to probably get the M1 Pro and he gets review units. Yeah, but he's not crazy. He's not making the same kind of videos. Also, the rules are totally different if your channel's way bigger. We know that for a fact. There's like if you're Marquez or Dave2D, if you have like millions of subscribers, you can say whatever you want, and Apple doesn't care because they know that if you don't get review units sent to you, that'll be like you're blacklisted and you're going to ask what's wrong, and then you can make videos about how Apple didn't send you. They used to send you stuff, now they don't. Apple kicked me out. They know that'll be a big story if a big channel doesn't get review units. I'm not saying it's solely because I tell people to buy something else. It's a bunch of things. It's the production value. It's the bizarreness of the channel. It's how unscripted it is, how unpredictable it is. There's a bunch of reasons, but if you have 5 million subscribers, you can say whatever you want. If you have 100,000 subscribers or 50,000 subscribers, maybe not. I don't really care though. Google did send me a Pixel, but that was because they didn't watch the videos at all. Let's see. Do you think Apple will sell their chips separately to add modularity to the Mac Pros? I don't think ARM really works that way. I don't think you can just add another ARM chip after the fact. I think that kind of eats into the whole reason it's so efficient is because it's a whole system on one single chip and everything is so close together. The electrons and the transistors and so that, like, the energy has very little distance to travel. And you can compact a bunch of transistors onto a really tiny space. That's what allows you to do a lot of compute cycles and consume very little power. So if you start stitching them excess together, then you don't get that efficiency gain, and probably it doesn't even scale that well, the way I understand it. Spill the tea. What would you have to do to get review units? I told you. You got to stick to a script, and you got to just not be wild or unpredictable. Don't have any passionate opinions. Don't feel super confident about anything. Have really high production value. Make all their products look good. Try to always say something nice about every basically suck up to them. Make them feel very, very comfortable with sending you a product, because basically if they send you one, they're going to want you to sell it. I mean, just think of it from Apple's perspective. Would you want to send a product to someone if they're going to tell their viewers to not buy it? Of course not. You're going to send it to the channels that make the product look good and try to convince people to buy it. And because I just don't want to be a channel that, blindly without question just says, here's a new Apple product, you should definitely buy it, or here's who should buy it, or it's great, it's fantastic, and try to highlight all the positive things. No, it's like, I'll give you my opinion because I'm an expert on that. If we just try to fall into doing whatever Apple wants, you're going to blend in with the crowd because there's a huge crowd of channels that are all saying the exact same things. Um, in my opinion, you have the best production value. I don't know how, but thank you, Kieran. Let's see. Sell their products. Yeah. Move their inventory. Basically, work for them, and they will work for you. Modular ARM computers do exist. Some early computers, even Apple's older PowerBooks, use a similar architecture to ARM, and they're still modular. Well, I think there's a reason that they didn't keep using those, and there's probably a reason we haven't seen them yet. But basically, as far as I understand it, Mark Gurman's been very accurate with his Apple Silicon leaks and his Mac leaks as of late. The timelines are questionable, but the chips and the number of efficiency cores and high performance cores usually end up being right. And Gurman is saying that the new Mac Pro doesn't have user upgradable RAM. It's just the exact same Mac Pro with an M2 Ultra in it instead of an Intel chip. He's probably right. I think that's likely what it is. It maybe has a few more PCIe slots, um, maybe for discrete GPUs or maybe for networking cards or afterburner cards. But in terms of just like additional ARM CPU chips, I don't think that's going to be modular. Um, oh, yay, Lightning gets review unit from Apple. Yeah, pretty much. Otherwise, be iJustine. Yeah, pretty much. iJustine is very Apple brand friendly. No hate towards iJustine. She just is a very positive person, and she highlights the positive features of any new product. Which that's her choice, and that's probably in her nature. That's in her personality to just focus on the positive. But some of us also want to be able to feel free to talk about whatever we want to talk about and just say, like, no, I don't think you should buy that. I think this is a terrible value and you should buy something else. Or you shouldn't buy this now because there's something better. Like, if you were the type of person to say, don't buy the new Mac Pro, Apple Silicon is around the corner, that would be falling into the leaks. That would be falling into don't buy today's product, wait for this next product because that's going to be way cheaper, way faster. Apple doesn't like that. That's not in their best interest to support. So, yeah, it's like, in my view, you're better off trying to just lean into your opinion than you are just trying to please a certain brand because brands will ultimately, just like they have with the new MacBook Pros and their single nans with slower read and write speeds, they'll ultimately betray you or they'll do something that you don't like. But if you've made a career out of highlighting them and only saying good things about them, you won't get away with it. You can't say what you want anymore. And to me, that's when making YouTube content no longer becomes fun. That's just it becoming a job. Now you've just been hired by Apple, but Google is the one paying you. I physically don't understand what the Mac Pro is for if it's basically identical to the Mac Studio in performance. There has to be ability to add RAM on top of the unified memory it comes with. I don't think it will be identical. I don't think they're upgrading the Mac Studio. That's the way I understood Mark Gurman's report. And again, Bloomberg has been very accurate with the rollout of the M1 chip, M1 Pro chip, M1 Max chip, M1 Ultra chip. They've been spot on with a lot of how Apple has handled their silicon rollout. And I think what is most likely is the M2 Ultra will only be in the Mac Pro, and the Mac Studio was a stopgap. And it'll just kind of sit untouched on the website for a long time. And if you want a more powerful desktop, you're going to have to get a Mac Pro, and that'll be a little bit more modular, but not super. And that one can give you the 190 gigs of unified memory, which they'll claim is about as good as having, half a terabyte of x86 memory. Uh, let's see. Why does Apple charge ridiculously high prices to upgrade RAM and storage while externally they are much more cheap? Because it's not the same thing, dumb kid. I'm sorry. I have a hard time. I mean, that's your name. I'm not calling you like you wrote dumb kid. That's his username, guys. Just so the audio listeners are aware. But extra SSDs and they're not even SSDs. Extra NANds and extra unified memory is not the same thing as external RAM, external memory. They're different fundamental. Like they don't perform the same way. It's not shared memory between computer and GPU RAM. It's not the same read and write speed as NANds that are directly attached. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, basically. Let's see. Annoyed that literally all of their builds have USB-A and no C. Yeah, that bothers me personally. USB-A should have never happened, and I'm still mad that it exists. Um, let's see. M2 Max is too slow for a Mac Pro. I wouldn't buy a tower for the same performance as a laptop. Yeah, that's why I think there's less people buying towers in general, is just because the MacBook Pros have incredibly great performance and they're mobile. You can take them with you. Plus, they have way better port selections than they did a few years ago, and they have really great battery life, really great speakers. So, probably a lot of people are in my similar camp, and I used to need a desktop because for the amount of content I wanted to produce, the iMac Pro was offering performance that I couldn't find in a laptop. Now I can find better performance than that and take it with me. So I've transitioned from a desktop guy to a laptop guy, and there's probably a lot of people that are transitioning. Randy did the same thing. He needed an iMac before, now he can get by with a laptop. So there's probably an increasing number of people doing that. Um, let's see. Apples to apples comparison. Oh, yeah. My wife needs a new MacBook for university. She's a media production video editor, M1 Pro or M2 Pro for video editing. I mean, like, sure, the M2 Pro will probably edit it a bit faster, but the question is, like, what's your financial position? I mean, second of all, are you buying the base model M2 Pro? If you're buying the base model, keep in mind the read and write speed. I would say if you have to ask, you're probably not that cautious about which one you're getting. I think you should get the M1 Pro because you could probably save a bunch of money by going for that one. If you're in university, you want to save as much money as you can, probably. M2 Pro will export a little bit faster, but how many videos are you doing in media production and video class? I took video editing classes, and we maybe exported one video a day, maybe less, depending on what you were working on, because usually those classes are just editing things in real time. It's not, let's export this 5 times over again. I don't know about the class, but personally, I don't think the M2 Pro is worth it unless you know it's worth it. If you're asking, that means you don't know, or you want someone else's opinion. If you're looking for another opinion, I'm going to tell you to buy the cheaper one. M1 Pro is still incredibly fast, very, very capable, and I think it's sad that the M2 Pro is trying to, like, the existence of the M2 Pro is convincing a lot of people that the M1 Pro is slow. It's not slow. It's an incredibly fast chip, and you probably won't max it out. Um, Karen, thank you for the super chat. Apple is greedy with review units. They don't pay a single cent to reviewers, and people have to send back review units. If no pay, should keep product. Well, you get the product early. That's the advantage. The thought process is if your channel gets a product early before consumers can buy it, then you have an advantage and you can make content about it and you'll make more money on it because you got it earlier than everybody else did. But the advantages kind of fall apart when there's like 20 or 30 channels all getting it at the same time. So I don't think they're being that greedy. It's fine. They can choose who they want to send it to. I don't care. I think you guys care way, way more about early review units than I do, which is funny because it doesn't really affect you guys. It affects me and I don't care. I just don't. Personally, even if I got review units early, I don't think I would want to do what everybody does. I would try to do something different, which is like either stream it so that when all the reviews drop at the same time, people would want to join mine because they can ask questions in real time. And it's live. It's like I can watch the edited videos later, but Drew's live unboxing is only going to be live right now. I would rather do that, but Apple probably has it in the contract that they're not allowed to do that. Paying with a review unit is illegal, I think. If not, then just very ethically wrong since it'll skew the review. Well, what would be wrong is if you didn't disclose that you were being paid. It wouldn't be wrong if you disclosed that this video is sponsored. If they paid you to review the product, then you would disclose that this is an ad. I'm getting reimbursed. If you didn't say you were getting reimbursed, then yeah, it would be illegal. Or not illegal, but extremely unethical. Or I think it goes against YouTube terms and conditions, actually. I don't think you can do that. What Apple products you wouldn't recommend to people? The base model M2 Pro MacBooks, the 14-inch and 16-inch. It's like if you care that much about export times, then you're probably the type of person to care about read and write speed. So you're getting worse read and write speed with those Macs. You're getting faster export times, but it kind of breaks even, but it still costs more than last year's model. So I would say just get last year's model. I don't recommend the 14 Plus or iPhone 14 to anyone. There is not a single use case I can think of where the 14 is a good buy. 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max, that's my go-to recommendation if you just want the best phone in the world. If you just want the best possible phone, yeah, 14 Pros, they're great. Amazing battery life, great camera, great displays. You can't beat them if money's not a factor. You don't care about the finances. You just want a great phone. But if you're on a budget and you don't care about the pros and you're thinking, well, maybe iPhone 14 would be good enough for me, just get the 13. It's like 99% the exact same experience and you'll save $100. So, yeah, I have a very difficult time saying the car crash detection, which it's such a life insurance upsell. Usually, if you care about your life, you'll buy this phone. It's like, first of all, that's such an extremely specific use case of like, you're in a car accident and you're incapacitated, so you can't call 911. And also the other person that was in the accident can't call 911. So you're by yourself in the middle of nowhere in a car crash that doesn't kill you, but you can't dial 911. It's like that narrow of a niche. Sorry, yeah, I can't really justify it. I mean, if you really, really care, then okay, ignore me. But you already know what you want. Your iPad 10 as well. I would not recommend anyone buy iPad 10. AirPods Max, I would recommend under a certain price point. I saw someone, I can't remember who, but someone told me recently that they found a pair of AirPod Max for like $330. I'm like, yeah, that's a great deal. There's problems with those headphones, but there's amazing parts of those headphones. Let's see. This is a bad trend, but they are only getting away with it because people buy it and they bought the M2 Air. Yeah, that's kind of the other realization of Apple skimping out on the NANDs with the new MacBooks is it shows that they didn't learn anything. Like, or maybe we did. Maybe what's better said is we didn't learn anything as consumers because Apple made the read and write speed worse on the M2 MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2. And it seems like it's going great. It probably simplified manufacturing for them. It made it more profitable. And they're still selling. People are still buying them. So if people keep buying these new MacBook Pros and these new M2 Mac Minis, then Apple's just going to keep on doing it. They're going to keep on cutting corners and looking for ways to cut cost and hope that we don't notice. So we didn't learn anything, I guess. Drew's Apple product recommendations. Literally anything certified refurbished. No, actually, most of the products on certified refurbished are not worth it, which is kind of funny. We just don't talk about them because there's horrible deals in here. I was just looking on my phone before I came in here. I don't know where they went, but yeah, see, look, there's still like $900 Intel Mac Minis with Intel Core i5s. Like, no, that's a terrible deal. Do not buy that. They're still selling 24-inch iMacs, which is disgusting. Where were they? Oh, yeah, iMac Pro is still in here. $5,600. I mean, in my opinion, this is the best looking iMac of all time. I don't think they ever peaked. Look how, like, you want to tell me that's not thin enough, Apple? Come on. This is such like a timeless, I wish the chin went away, but if we're going to keep the chin around, this is how you do it. You do black bezels, space gray, and you put the logo right there. It's iconic. In the I/O. Plus, by the way, certified refurbished iMac Pros, they still get the blacked out keyboard and mouse and the blacked out lightning cable and power cord. You cannot buy that keyboard and mouse separately. You can only get it with the iMac Pro. But yeah, still $5,600. None of these are worth it, but there's tons of them. Or really any of the Mac Pros either. $4,600 for that. You can get a M1 Ultra Mac Studio, which will beat that hands down, no question. It'll probably run circles around these Mac Pros, but they still have tons of them. Not anything certified refurbished, but anything you're probably at least interested in. Let's see. No one can stop me to buy the M1 Touch Bar. Let's use a product for a few months, then review it. Oh, sorry, a few minutes. You mean, let's go to backup here. Is that what you mean? Karen says, I don't give a crap what anyone says. I love M2 13-inch MacBook Pro because of the touch bar, touch bar, touch bar. Nothing can convince me otherwise. I'm not trying to tell you the touch bar is bad. I'm just saying don't fall in love with it because its time is limited. Eventually, I don't know when. Could be this year, could be next year, but at some point they're going to get rid of the touch bar. They've already gotten rid of it on the higher end MacBooks. I think the only reason they're still using the touch bar on the M2 Mac, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, is just because they wanted to recycle the design. It was cheap to keep using the existing chassis. But at some point it will go away. And at some point in the next 10 years, you'll probably, maybe 15 years, at some point we're going to reach a threshold where the touch bar MacBooks don't get the latest software support. And you can keep holding on and keep clinging for dear life saying, no, no, I want the touch bar so much. I love the touch bar. But I'm trying to tell you, the sooner you get over it, the better. Because if you fall in love with it and you get used, I had it for, let's see, I got my touch bar MacBook in 2016. And then I stopped using that in 2018, I think. Yeah, I had the MacBook Pro and my iMac Pro for a while, and then I realized I wasn't really using the MacBook Pro anymore. I love the touch bar, but I got used to having it for like 2 years, and I loved it, but I was like, the sooner I get over this, the better. If you get used to having it for 10 years, and then you have to get over it, you're going to have a lot harder time separating and learning to live without it than I will. And I still miss it. That's still one of the biggest things I wish my MacBook Pro had. So it's like falling in love with 3D Touch basically in 2023. It's like, yeah, if you discover you really like 3D Touch in 2023, I got bad news for you. You're not going to have that many options going forward. But some people just like to live in denial of just like, no, any moment I have, I'm going to dwell on it. But it's like at some point you're going to have to you're going to have to move on. And if you were used to having it for 10 years, then you're going to be pretty disappointed. The sooner you get over it is the better. The same is that same argument needs to be told to the stubborn people that won't accept the 27-inch iMac isn't coming back, or the home button iPhone lovers. Yeah, Apple kind of keeps you hanging for a little while, but your options are very limited if you're insistent on having a touch bar. You don't have that many choices, and your choices are just going to get worse and worse as time goes on. So I'm just kind of a futurist in that way. When there's new products or new standards, like when USB-C came out, I'd never heard of it. The first time I heard of it, it wasn't the first product that had it, but the first time I saw it was the 12-inch MacBook, which came out in 2015. And Apple unveiled this super thin, super light MacBook, and they redesigned the keyboard. Oh no. And they showcased how you could do everything through one port, even though I'd never seen it before. As soon as I saw it, even though I don't have any USB-C accessories or USB-C cables, I don't have any of that. As soon as I saw it, I was just like, great, let's all move on. Let's all switch to this as soon as possible. Let's get everything over to Type-C so that in the future we could eventually just have one port and one cable for everything. And then we wouldn't need adapters. We wouldn't need dongles or any of that. And day one, I was on board with it. And I'm still on board with it and wishing that we would move on from Lightning or move on from HDMI, but it's just been so complicated to get the industry to move on because they're so paranoid of how people will react if they don't include Type-C. I personally would still rather have 4 USB-C ports than MagSafe, but that's just me. So yeah, it's like when a new standard comes out or when a new product comes out, I'm like, let's adapt. Let's move on to the new thing because the sooner we do, the better. Let's see. Rip 3D Touch. I'm living in denial that I have to move on from small phones and my iPhone 13 mini. I mean, your 13 mini will age pretty well, but I'm not convinced that mini phones are gone for good because, I mean, for one, they've died before. You know, they've come back to life. Like Apple got rid of the 5.8-inch iPhone and was just doing 6.1 inches and bigger. And then they brought back the mini in 2020. Well, they didn't really call a mini iPhone before, but you know, they brought an even smaller iPhone. Didn't sell the way they had hoped. Now they're doing a Plus, but the Plus isn't selling all that well. I don't have concrete evidence, but I'm just saying like there's a chance they may come back to the Mini again because they've come back to it before. Whereas they have not like gotten rid of 3D touch and then decided they wanted it later. Or they haven't like ditched the touch bar on the higher end MacBooks and then decided to add it back later. Like I haven't seen evidence of that or any rumors of that, but they have gotten rid of small iPhones and then brought them back before. So that's more of like a seasonal thing. Um, who do I think will be CEO of Apple after Tim? I think it's usually whoever typically is the CFO. I forget his name, but someone will say it in the chat. Uh, let's see. I don't judge on much, but if you like 3D Touch, I'm going to judge you a little. 3D Touch was cool. They just changed iOS to not really take advantage of it anymore. That's why it made not using it a lot easier because I was like, yeah, I don't really have a need for it's like I don't really need to press hard on anything because they redesigned how haptic touch works on the iPhone. Whereas before there were a lot of advantages to 3D touch. Now there was like, there's not really that much. Would be great if Apple One included more storage, maybe 3 terabytes or 4 terabytes for the whole family. They do that. It's just a $40 a month plan, unfortunately. Yeah, Luca. I think Tim Cook was part of the. He was a temporary CEO when Steve Jobs was dealing with his cancer. And then when Steve passed, Tim Cook took over as full time CEO. So, uh, Luca or what's his name? John something. I forget his last name. There's so many Johns and Johnnies at Apple, or there used to be at least. Um, but yeah, someone who's probably a familiar face that is very predictable and straightforward. I don't think everyone says Craig. I don't think they know what they're talking about. I think I think people just think Craig Federighi is funny in events because he's kind of a meme. So they're like, he should be CEO, and it's like he's just the head of software. I don't know if that is a good choice for CEO of the entire company. I think Tim Cook has been a great CEO for the shareholders. Maybe not as great a CEO for the consumer, but I mean, still a good CEO for the consumer. Let's be honest. Like, there's a lot of products that Tim made that Apple probably wouldn't have under Steve. And Tim Cook was about expanding market share and expanding accessibility and growth. And Tim Cook oversaw biometrics. And Tim Cook was more in favor of having varying size options and cheaper options that were more repairable. Steve never really showed much interest in that. So, I feel like he's done a good job, but probably has less of an emphasis on being innovative or thinking very differently. I mean, who knows what Steve would have done because, we can't speak for him, but Jeff Williams probably would be the CEO. That wouldn't surprise me. But uh, I think Apple would have probably done some more risk taking or some more innovative approaches that were maybe not as appealing to us. Maybe they would have involved more expensive devices or more limited options because that makes the lineup look cleaner. I don't know, but we need a memeable CEO. Just remember that Craig Federighi is responsible for iPadOS. Do you really want him in charge? Every issue you have with iPadOS, that's technically Craig's fault because he's the chief of software. See, it's because I say things like this, I'm never going to be on the early review unit things, and that's fine. I'd rather be able to say whatever I want. Let's see. 5 gigabytes in 2023 is like 100 megabytes in 2011 when we first got iCloud. It's true, but the good counter argument that my own audience brought up in my videos is on my streams is that for every gigabyte of free cloud storage you offer, that's there's like over 1 billion active daily iCloud users now. That's over an exabyte of cloud space that you have to pay for with nothing in return. Which, I'm sure Apple could afford it. So let's say they wanted to increase it from 5 gigs of free storage to 15 gigs of free storage. That would be like 10 exabytes of cloud space that has to be encrypted, backed up multiple times for security's sake, that Apple would have to pay out of pocket for. that would directly correlate to less revenue generated from iCloud Plus, because it would convince people that they don't need to pay extra for iCloud. There would be an increasing number of people that would say, "Oh, okay, I don't need to pay the 99 cents a month or whatever." So I think that translates to, I don't have exact wholesale prices on how much it costs to buy 10 exabytes of cloud storage, but I'm sure it's maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million, but um, it doesn't really support Apple's goal of becoming more of a services company. Honestly, I think that Apple might in the future get to a point where any type of iCloud accounts aren't free anymore. I think that sounds crazy today, but as Apple wants to become more of a monthly revenue service company, it might start to make more sense to just start requiring everybody to at least pay 99 cents a month, just to have an Apple account. Um, and if you don't have it, then you get, I don't know, very, very limited iCloud features. But that, because the response of that would likely be so bad, it's more likely that Apple is just going to keep 5 gigs, and they know over time that 5 gigs is going to become progressively less and less possible for people to live with. Um, so they just want that monthly recurring revenue, even if it's a little bit, even if it's just 99 cents. They could probably even extrapolate it to $10 a year, so it's less than 99 cents a month. And they'd be like, see, it's really, really cheap. It barely costs you anything. But they could count in that extra revenue and just be like, hey, you keep coming back. But because the backlash would be bad, it's probably, they're just going to say, yeah, 5 gigs free, 5 gigs free. And then we'll be into the 2030s and 2040s. And basically, you can take one picture and fill up your iCloud or whatever. And it's like, oh, I guess you got to pay extra for that paid iCloud option. Um, Thank you, Marngel. It's that time of the month again. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Marngel. Appreciate that. And Simply Sora for 7 months of support. Karen Super Chatted. Phil Schiller is better than Craig Federighi. Well, Phil's not really there anymore. But yeah, I liked Phil too. Although I felt bad that they made him announce AirPower when they had no idea how AirPower would work. Um, yeah, Scott Forstall would not be a good CEO. I agree. Do you think Tim and the things he's done to go green is not directly related to selling more products? It's good he is doing that, but he's no saint just running a company. Wait, what do you is not directly related to selling the things he's done to go green? I don't know if you mean green as in profitable or green as in eco-friendly. Um, he's no saint just running a company. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that I wouldn't describe Tim Cook as a saint per se, but I also, the truth is in the middle. Some people are just like greedy businessman that just wants money. Other people are, he's changing the world for the good and he's the best CEO in the business. It's somewhere in the middle. Like, I do think that Apple does more than the average company does for the environment. And I think they were very brave to remove the charge brick. That took courage. I know people meme about courage, but I genuinely think that did take courage, because that was something that all phones had included. And Apple was like, hey, not only can we make this phone a bit more profitable for us, but it will also objectively, you cannot fight me on this, it will objectively be more fuel efficient to transport products if the boxes are way thinner that they are transported in. There's just That's just a fact, especially when you're shipping them by the pallet and when you're selling tens of millions of them like Apple is. You can now fit like 40% more iPhones on the same boat or in the same um, plane shipment, or in the same UPS truck or whatever. Uh, that does help with efficiency. And, Apple didn't have to make their whole headquarters completely carbon negative, but they chose to. They chose to cover it in solar, and they chose really efficient HVAC systems that they went into excruciating amount of detail to make sure that their HQ could recirculate as much, air as possible and not cause too many wastes. And they actually produce more energy through the solar on their roof than they use. So they are powering the houses and businesses around their HQ, and they often buy big solar farms that help power their iCloud servers and stuff. So I do think they have an emphasis, and obviously look at their products. They use a lot of recycled aluminum. Um, They keep out a lot of harmful materials from their products, which does drive the price up. But yes, at the end of the day, they are a company. They do care about money, and a lot of their decisions are based on what is more profitable. But in my view, finding solutions that are profitable and better for the environment is the best case scenario, because if a company doesn't care about profitability, they'll go bankrupt and they won't exist, and then they can't really make eco-friendly decisions, right? And uh, money to a company is like oxygen to a you know a human being. Like, you need it to survive. You can't do anything without oxygen. You could take away oxygen, and someone say, "Hey, I need that," and be like, "So all you care about in life is oxygen? There's more to life than oxygen." It's like, yeah, I know. I'm not saying it's everything, but I kind of need that. In the same way, a company needs to have income, it needs to have revenue. So you can't just say, okay, we're going to do something really environmentally friendly, but we're going to lose a bunch of money on this. Well, that's not sustainable. You want to be in a situation where the company is incentivized to do something that is good for the environment. That's why I like Aptera, and that's why I like Tesla so much, is because, like, if the company is losing money by an eco-friendly program or initiative, they're not going to want to push it very hard. That's kind of the issue we're facing with Electrify America right now. I know this is kind of EV related, but it's a good example, is like, they are incentivized to build out charging stations for electric cars. They are not incentivized to make the charging experience simple or reliable or easy, or they're not even making money off of the charging session, which means that when a charge station goes down or one is broken and that the charging experience is annoying and hard to do, that doesn't matter to them, because actually when lots of people are charging on their network, they lose money, which ends with a worse experience for the consumer. So you want the business to have a environmentally friendly initiative or program that helps them also make money, because then they're going to want to push it really, really hard, which will be hopefully better for the environment and better for the company. You can't just pick one and say, well, for the environment to be happy, the company needs to die, and then all the consumers won't have any products. Like, you can always have that mindset of humans are bad for the environment, so we should all just die, and then the planet will be. That's not very productive either, right? So I think that Tim has done great things for the environment, and Apple prioritizes the globe in the world a lot more than most companies do, but they also do prioritize profits and having a healthy amount of money coming in, which I respect both. Matt Sloop, thank you for the super chat. I have found myself quoting your Tim Cook impression when using the word product to people, and no one gets the reference. Also, my favorite character you do on your skits is Minnie Drew. Love your comedy. Thank you, Matt. That's very kind of you. So I hope that answered your question in Doctoral. Tim Cook is the second best CEO Apple has had. I mean, Tim Cook has done a lot more for Apple. Well, you needed Steve for Apple to start, but you also needed Tim for Apple to grow. I don't think Steve Jobs would have grown Apple to the size they are today. If you just look at the way he treated product lines and the way he priced things and the way he designed things, it was not. Steve Jobs' focus was never on being a very popular option. He was just like, this is our option, this is the best, and this is what we're doing. And Tim Cook was more prone to, like, what's going to increase our volume, what's going to increase our market share, which often involves listening to the consumer, often involves, like, what do the people want? People want big phones, let's make big phones. Whereas Steve Jobs was like, I don't want a big phone, so we're not going to do that. Let's see. People complaining about companies doing things for profit is basically saying they're against capitalism. They should just be honest and admit that, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, they're probably not against it as a whole. They don't like it when companies do, like we started the stream off with, when they go cheap on certain products that make the product worse for the sake of profitability. That annoys us. And I can complain about that and say, I wish Apple didn't do that. I wish that the read and write speed on every M2 Pro MacBook would be better than any previous generation MacBook Pro. But that doesn't mean I hate capitalism. That just means that Apple cut corners somewhere that I didn't agree with. But that's why I'll argue it's not a pointless decision. It's just a point for Apple and not a point for us. Hello, Shoria Jetty. Thanks for tuning in. Let's yeah, John Scully. He was the best CEO. That's what you meant. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. It's not that hard to put a number road. Just say, what are you guys living in a country where about 50% of cars are now electric? Most people just charge their cars at home. Yeah, I know. We know. I charge my car from home too. It's just there are some times that probably that I'm guessing e-uploads you're living in like either Norway or Denmark, in which case like the capital of my state has more people than your country in it. So like when you live in a country as big as the United States, there's a lot more road tripping going on than there probably is road tripping in Norway or Denmark. Um, and you probably don't have to deal with cruddy Electrify America because that's not there. Because Apple has shareholders and there's nothing wrong with that. Without them, there would be no Apple. That's true. Apple wouldn't be able to scale up to the volume they have or build as many products as they have. You know, we take for granted supply chains, I think, a lot. That's the biggest thing I think that has been eye-opening to me from the whole pandemic and how it affected manufacturing lines and stuff is just how fragile it all is and how incredible it is. Like probably the most amazing thing that Apple does, in my opinion, isn't isn't the silicon. It isn't that they can come up with a really power efficient chip that has really great battery life and really fast performance. That's cool. That's impressive, and I like talking about it. But that's not the most impressive thing. It's not the displays. You know, they don't even manufacture them. They work with other companies like Samsung and LG. And the display I'm using right now, it's gorgeous. You know, really high refresh rate, really beautiful accuracy, rich pixel density. That's all impressive, but what's the most mind-boggling thing that they're able to do consistently year after year after year is within a very short window, they can design a phone with enhancements, better battery life, better display, better chip, better cameras, better biometrics, better whatever, better build quality, new colors, what have you, faster speeds. They can design that, and within a matter of months, like I've been following the iPhone leak days for a while, and I know that the design is pretty much finalized and locked in by around May. They can go from May to September, there's like 4 months, be building them at the scale of tens of millions. Like, think about that for a second. Think about how complicated it is to build 100,000 of one thing. Now times that by 10. Now times that by another 10. And by the way, you only have like 90 to 100 days to figure out this manufacturing line. Like, you only have a couple of months to add a new feature, add a new display, add a new like Type C or something, add a new chip, and you only have a few months to scale up production and deliver it globally to dozens of countries across the globe, all synchronized around the same time. Everybody's taking delivery of their phones all at the same time. That is the most mind-blowing thing to me, is that not only can you design these computers with amazing displays, battery lives, and performance, but you can scale it up on such an extreme scale, and we just kind of accept it. We just kind of read about it on a website and it shows up in the mail, and we're like, here it is. The camera's not as good as I thought, you know. It's like we just get so hung up on the details, and I don't think we really appreciate how incredible it is that they can iterate and improve that quickly, constantly, and just be like, yep, now it's better, now it's better, now it's better. And like, no kidding, it's not always that massive of an upgrade. They only had like a couple months to update it. That is every electronic product in China, not just Apple. Well, yeah, but Apple does it at higher volume. Like iPhone outsells every other smartphone in terms of single unit volume. Like that's why iPhones are still at the top sellers, because Apple iOS is, depending on the country, sometimes it's a 40% market share, sometimes it's a 50% market share, but Apple's doing that with like 4 or 5 phones, whereas Android's doing it with hundreds of phones. They're accompanying for 50 to 60 or 70% market share. And also, most recent data shows that iOS market share has been growing over the past 3 years, not shrinking. That's why Tim Cook gets paid the big bucks. Scully, Spindler, and Emilio ran Apple into the ground. Steve brought it back and took Apple from being alternative to being a mainstay in everyday life. It's true. He saved Apple when he came back, but he did intentionally want Tim Cook to take over, and he brought Tim Cook to his deathbed basically, and was just like, hey, don't do what I would do. Do what you want to do. Do what you think is best for the company. Don't do what you think I would want. And so, in a way, Tim Cook doing what he wants with Apple is what Steve wanted. It's kind of a paradox. Though I'm not the biggest fan of Cook. His salary is pretty low, but stock options and stuff. Yeah, I don't get why people get fed up on that. There was all these headlines. I was like, you're forcing me to make jokes about this. Like, I cannot not make a joke when people write headlines saying Tim Cook volunteered to cut his salary in half, which when you open the article, you see that it was from 100 million to 50 million. I'm like, I have to joke about that. There's no way I can say, wow, he's an honorable man. Good for him. Oh, he's going to live on only 50 million a year? Can he afford pizza? Can that man feed himself? Not to mention, I don't think he's like married or has kids, as far as I'm aware. So, yeah, like it's 50 million for one single guy, as far as I'm aware. Maybe he has a secret boyfriend. I don't know. I know he's gay, but um, this, as far as I'm aware, I've never heard of him being with a partner. He's never referenced one. Like the other executives will refer to, with the iPhone 14, I took pictures of my last family trip. It's just one guy living on 50 million a year. Oh no, how dare he? He's so friendly to cut his expense in half. But yeah, like you said, he has stock options. He owns like a crap ton of Apple stock. He's probably got like hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank account, or hundreds of millions of dollars in stock, or billions of dollars in stock potentially. So I can't be happy like or applaud someone that's that rich that is cutting their salary in half. That's not the same thing at all as someone who makes, if someone was making, well, you got to keep in mind cost of living, right? So these guys that live in Cupertino, very high cost of living. Just to have like a bare bones basic house there, you got to be a millionaire. So if someone was making like $500,000 a year and they took a 50% pay cut, I'd be like, okay, that's pretty drastic for them in that region. I don't know how they can swing that. Maybe it's through stock options or what have you. Or a good example, Tim Cook likes privacy. That's true. Very true. He prioritizes it for his customers and for himself. That's fine. I got no problem with that. But a good example is the CEO of Aptera, which is this electric vehicle startup company that I'm a huge fan of. And I've never wanted a startup company to succeed more in my life than I have Aptera. I'm so in love with the product, so in love with the marketing team and the research and development team. And I love how transparent they are. I'm a huge Aptera fan. And in their SEC filings, because they have investors, they're not publicly traded yet, but it was revealed in their public documents that the CEO of the company makes 180 grand a year. And living in San Diego, that is not that much, to be honest. Like, I know how much San Diego real estate costs. I have family there. 180 grand a year is like not super high in my view. For the CEO of like a startup that's dealing with like millions and millions of dollars being invested, and that kind of thing. So that's what I applauded, is like that, 180 grand plus. I know he has a family and kids and stuff. I'm like, that's just like barely cutting the bill. I don't know what he like, because he doesn't have a big pile of stock options to pull from like most CEOs do, right? Because he's a brand new company. He's in a brand new startup, and he's done other companies in the past. But I'm like, living on 180 grand in San Diego is pretty like middle class, honestly. It's not that high. So I appreciate them for not, in startup mode when they're trying to secure funding to start production, they're not giving themselves $1 million salaries, which they easily could. I love Rivian. Rivian's also a startup that has a lot of cash in the bank, and they're doing great, and they're ramping production, but their CEO makes big bucks. He's a nice guy. I've seen him in interviews. He looks very friendly, very nice, but he's also making way, way, way more. I think he's making millions, or I can't remember what the number was, but it was at least 600,000 a year, way more than that. But also, they're not living in San Diego. You missed all of life. I admire Tim personally, though, not due to salary, but because despite being such a private person, he publicly came out as gay for visibility. No, I appreciate him for that, too. Yes, Cook did take a pay cut compared to other CEOs of other companies, but Cook will be fine. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even think most people know what the salaries are of other CEOs, but a lot of the time they don't take cash salaries. They just have a bunch of stock, which they can choose to sell if they need to. Um, but yeah, I wasn't just like applauding Tim for cutting his pay. I mean, sure that's better than laying off people, I agree, but like that's it's not a ton. That's what it was. 650,000 a year. Yeah, it's pretty big bucks. And living in mostly working on the factory line, that's in Normal, Illinois. 650 grand in Normal, Illinois is very different from 180 grand in San Diego. Despite being CEO of the most valuable company in the world, he doesn't have as high wealth compared to other billionaire CEOs. I guess on that alone, I can somewhat respect it. Yeah, he doesn't take as much money as other CEOs do, but it's still a lot. I mean, I'm not saying he's taking. Can we really call 50 million a year a modest salary? You know, I don't. Even in even in Cupertino, that's a lot of money. Uh, Plus, he's the boss, so he can kind of choose to give himself a raise whenever he feels like it too. Uh, he just became a billionaire last year. He is doing a great job. See, I know a lot of people that are against the concept of billionaires existing. I'm not fundamentally against it, but I know a ton of people that are just like, no individual should be capable of owning $1 billion worth of assets. So it's funny to me when people are like, Tim Cook makes a lot less than other CEOs. He only just recently became a billionaire. It's like, oh, wow. How modest. You're making so little. You're you weren't even a billionaire until you were what, 60? Come on now. Tim isn't in the top five richest people because he wasn't a founder. Steve Jobs, for example, would be the richest person if he never sold any Apple stock and was still alive. From what I remember reading about Steve, he didn't really take a cash salary. He did have stock options, but um, the only like pretty lavish, like there's a picture of the house Steve Jobs lived in when he died. It's nothing fancy. It's a pretty basic looking house. But the only like fancy rich thing, people were like, how are we going to reimburse you, Steve? Like, you're the CEO of the company. We're supposed to give you something. He was like, I want a private jet so I can fly wherever, whenever. And I want, he wanted this really like custom yacht that was going to be all designed exactly to his liking. And they never really finished it, but I remember reading about it in the book of like this super yacht that was going to be super efficient and fast and let him travel the world. So I think he liked to travel, but he wasn't so much about buying super expensive things. He just wanted to be able to travel easily, which, as you can imagine, if you're Steve Jobs, you can't just fly business class because there's going to be a bunch of people, crowd of people surrounding you everywhere you go, asking you questions. Um, Joshua says, my husband and I make 80,000 combined. We're in Oklahoma. Literally anywhere else that would be poverty. Here that's lower middle class. I dream of making 100 grand a year. No, that's fine. I know what you mean. I live in a pretty similar situation. If somebody is against billionaires, they're also the ones who are against capitalism. I feel like, well, that's a different discussion, but I think there's a line that most of them would draw. Again, I'm not this type of person. I think it's dangerous for any entity, whether it's a government or organization, to assume that someone has too much money, because it's like, sure, I can understand your argument that no one needs $1 billion. Why do you need that much wealth? Can't we use that money towards other things? I get that argument, but it's dangerous when you get into the legality of any government agency deciding someone has too much money. Because how do you know that that government agency will change what the definition of too much money is in the future? So it's more of a slippery slope type thing. I'm not so much worried that, oh no, billionaires are going to get taxed. I'm not worried about billionaires getting taxed. That's fine. But I'm more worried about what happens when, there's no billionaires. So then we we tax the millionaires, and then when there's no millionaires, we tax the sub-millionaire. It's a slippery slope. So those type of people that are against the existence of billionaires, I don't think they're against capitalism. They just think that if you acquire that many assets, someone needs to step in and redistribute those assets or tax those unrealized gains. I've seen laws or bills pitched in that way of like you can be forced to sell your stock so that you can pay more taxes if your net worth exceeds $1 billion. They're like, see, that would apply to a very small percentage of the public, so it doesn't really hurt that many people. It's like, yeah, but where where could that line be drawn again in the future? Um, I'm one of those people who don't think people should be able to have over $1 billion of wealth. There you go. And I doubt Marngel is against capitalism. But yeah, I have family members that I've had discussions with this exact same topic, and it's an interesting one. But I understand both perspectives. Like, if you want to make the argument that those people have too much money, then there's probably someone with a lot less money than you that could point at you and say you don't need that much money. So where we draw that line of too much is a little sketchy, I think. Like, yeah, I can agree with you. $1 billion saying that's too much, sure, probably. Telling rich people like Jeff Bezos or whoever that you have to live on 900 million a year. Okay, I don't think they'll suffer with 900 million a year. That's fine. But if we have people drawing lines and then they start lowering those lines, how much lower could they get it? Uh, Michael Cochran says, I oppose the existence of billionaires. We have so many people literally sleeping on streets and children starving. There should be a sizable wealth tax. Right. And there's problems, but again, you could take that a step further. If you are able to watch my channel right now, you have an internet connection and you have a device that's capable of playing a live stream on YouTube. You have a lot more money than lots of other people around the world. You have a lot more, so what's to stop a government from saying, we don't want you to have the iPhone 14. You have too much money because someone else is in need, so we're going to take your money and give it to them. If you don't draw a principal line somewhere, well, no, I don't make too much money. Yeah, but you're buying things you don't need. So that's the same argument you're using towards billionaires. They're buying things they don't need. They don't need that much money. Well, who's deciding who has too much? That's what's dangerous, in my view. More money, more problems. Let's see. I would agree that no one in the right mind can need $billions, but we shouldn't decide what is too much for someone because it never ends well. I think that's a slippery slope that progressively could be worse because there's probably always someone with less than you. And if you're going to use that argument of we could use other people's resources that have too much to help others, at first it can be good intended and it could have positive outcome, but it can work its way down more and more and more. In a true capitalist system, there would be no government intervention and you'd have real money, so you probably wouldn't be able to get rich with stocks. Yeah, I don't think most people are in favor of a true, no limits, no regulation capitalist system. I'm definitely not, just so we're clear. Um, Jeff Bezos has every right to be a billionaire. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's people trying to advocate that he broke the law or that he illegally became a billionaire. I don't think anyone's made that claim. But what's dangerous is the double standards with taxes on unrealized gains. Like, a lot of people would say, how do you tax billionaires because they actually don't have that much in cash? Most of their net worth, both Musk or Bezos or whoever, the reason they have hundreds of billions of dollars is because they have stock options and they own a lot of stock in companies that performed very, very well. And there's some negative consequences if we start enforcing unrealized gain taxes because in some ways in property taxes in different states, we already have that. But if we start saying, okay, you have $100 billion, we want you to have less than $1 billion, that means regardless of how the company is performing, Bezos is forced to sell major stakes in Amazon, which makes all Amazon shareholders, even if you're not a millionaire, even if you're a reasonable middle-class citizen that makes, I don't know, 50,000 or 100,000 a year, somewhere in there. If you own a bunch of Amazon stock, now your Amazon stock is going to be worth way, way less because some of the biggest shareholders are forced to sell their stock. And the company as a whole may not have as much buying power, or um, he has to just send all that money to the government, I guess. But uh, the double standard with it is, okay, well, if you can tax unrealized gains, does that mean you can write off unrealized losses? My guess is if that bill or law passes, they would say no, but it does it does show a inherent flaw in the system of, well, if you make a bunch of money, you'll be penalized for it. If you lose a bunch of money, we're not going to help you. That's that's basically how it works. Like right now, if you have business expenses, you can write those off your taxes. But if we start taxing unrealized gains, then your stock could drop a lot, and you could write off those losses without um, actually selling any stock, which means you'd pay less in taxes. But I don't know how that bill would work. I'm guessing they would phrase the bill in a way that we get all your money if your stock performs well, and you get nothing if your stock performs poorly. So, so basically, just not that many people want stock options. Plus, you can't stop billionaires from moving their assets to foreign banks. If you don't want to keep your money in the U.S., you can keep it elsewhere. In another country that wants to have more billionaires and more investment going on, they can store their value elsewhere. So unless you're planning on like outright banning billionaires from living in the U.S. and working in the U.S., which I think has all kinds of downsides of investment and where companies can grow and how many jobs are available. There's all kinds of problems with that. Um, we basically have to pick our poison on who should have the most power, either between companies or the government. Neither one are good options. I think a healthy mixture is the best place to be. You don't want the government having too much power, and you don't want businesses having too much power, which I do think that overall capitalism's been a good thing for humanity, but there's absolutely a bunch of downsides to it, and it's very corrupt, and there's a lot of flaws, and there's a lot of holes in it, but there's not really a better system we've come up with that we have evidence to support performs better. Workers are the ideal option for people to control the economy. That does mean advocating for socialism. Yeah, I mean, it gets messy with that too. Um, I don't think it's about the rich. It is about being comfortable. Any you afford to buy a house, go on vacation, retire, medical bills, etc., without breaking the bank. Right, but can you afford is what you mean. Can you afford to buy a house, go on vacation? Who decides how much vacation is acceptable? Like if someone's going on vacation for 6 weeks out of the year, but there's someone that's in financial ruin and needs help, what's to stop a government agency from saying, oh, you don't need to go on vacation 6 weeks. You can live with 4 weeks. That way, this money can go to someone in need. You lose out on a lot of control that way. It gets messy. I'm not trying to say one solution is easy. It's very easy to just look at bare bones solution. Give rich money to poor people. Problem solved. No more poor people. It's very easy to look at it that way. But once you see the outcomes of that, or why those people are in the situation they are, it gets tough. Rich people should just be reinvesting into the comedy to make even more money while benefiting everyone else. That's true. Like the reason Elon Musk became the richest person in the world isn't because Elon took the highest salary at Tesla. They weren't like writing up people's salaries. Should we pay Elon $100 billion? Yes, please. Okay, let's write him a check. No, they gave him stock options that were rewarded based on how the company performed. So he owns a bunch of shares in the company, but who dictates the value of those shares? We do. The economy does. So if a bunch of people buy Tesla stock and the value goes way, way up, basically our buying of Tesla stock is what made Elon super rich. And hopefully Elon continues to benefit the business and the company continues to perform well. That way we feel like we got a good deal on our shares of the company. But if you put buying pressure on all the big shareholders, then the stock will inherently not grow as fast, which means that all of us middle class that are buying stocks don't get as much growth, don't get as much gains, because the billionaires aren't reinvesting into the economy as much. Let's see. Closer to economics than politics. Politics these days is literally either supporting or being against the existence of knowledge, and with parties that goes both ways depending on the subject. I don't like political parties as a whole. I don't really like the two-party system, but I also don't like the fight. I just think that the concept of, sorry, this is getting a little political. We should wrap up here, shouldn't we? Um, I don't like really. I think that anyone who thinks they should be president probably shouldn't be president. And I think that just the overall concept of government is flawed because it relies on human nature being good. Like governments would work if humans weren't corrupt, but I think humans, especially when given lots of power, can be very flawed and very power hungry, and humans are just not good at dealing with power, whether it's being in charge of a huge company, being in charge of a government. There's always things that can go wrong and probably will go wrong given enough time. If you look at a history of humanity and all of the different empires in different countries that have grown to power and fallen apart and dismantled, um, there's there's been way bigger, way more powerful empires in the past that still fell apart. So I'm just kind of like the let's just hold on and try to focus on the good. That's why I like technology and talking about Apple products or electric vehicles, because I'm like, this stuff is really neat and it can benefit people. Let's focus on being optimistic, because what governments are going to do um, is unpredictable and a lot of the time wrong, or can take away control or can give control to the wrong people. And I just I just have a very strong amount of skepticism towards assuming governments do the right thing, because sometimes they do, but a lot of the times they don't. And when they don't, there's not much you can do about it. So, Drew's relatively apolitical, which makes him ironically the best person to talk about politics. Yeah, I don't. I don't enjoy talking about different political parties or who to vote for, because I think it's all broken. I think how many, like, if we just talk about the impact you can have on those around you, like how much change can one person really have, like how much change can Tim Cook really do? He can have a lot of impact over his company, over his workers, over products that we buy, products. But how many people can really say that like their lives were changed, or like fundamentally like their core ideology or how they treat others was changed based on Tim Cook? Probably not that many. Maybe close friends and people around him. And I think that what most of the world would benefit from is more people focusing on their local communities, more focusing on the people around them, not trying to necessarily fire up a political party and get everybody behind your name and to vote for your figure and vote for your party and your side. How much blind following is going to be obsessed in that? How much corruption can go on when people are famous and get that much power? How much misuse? How much defense? Like, think of the boys with Homelander followers and that kind of thing. Like how much abuse can go on when you form those giant communities, giant big gatherings of groups of people, and you get these blind loyalists or people that will defend them no matter what they do. How much corruption can go on, opposed to how much corruption can really go on when you just try to be a positive influence for those around you, your friends, your family members. Just try to listen to them, understand what they're interested in, try to find shared activities, shared interests, and make and spend quality time, quality experiences together. I think that's what humans are good at, is being more personal, one on one, which has kind of influenced the way I frame my channel. That's why I'm not up so much about growth. I'm not so much about we need to put whatever we need in the title, whatever we need in the thumbnail that gets us to 1 million subscribers so that we can then get to 10 million subscribers. It doesn't matter if it's wrong or clickbaity. We need to do all these sponsored brand deals so that I can get enough money to spend on the channel so that we can grow bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm like, that's not my focus. I want to focus more on the individual, like more focus on we're having a conversation. That's why I like doing these live streams. It's like talking to people, understanding their backgrounds, getting more personal, knowing people in the chat by name like James and Joshua and Caleb, um, and remembering their stories. Like I can hear what they've told me in the past, and I feel like I know them, even though we haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person. Um, I think that's where human nature is best served. Is like smaller, more personal, and like absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's like giving people a lot of attention and a huge voice and a lot of power usually brings out the worst in them, and they reprioritize things. You see it all the time with celebrities, right? Like big musicians and actors, they get really big, and then they become more self-centric, and they kind of lose a lot of that humble beginnings or what brought them there. And it's just we're not good at being famous. Humans in general, we're not good at it. It's very hard to do it in a way that's ethical or responsible, I think. So, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that my channel didn't blow up to an extreme amount. You know, it's enough to keep the lights on and pay the bills, which I'm grateful for because I enjoyed doing this. But um, I don't know if I'd be the same person I am today if the channel was a 10 million or subscriber or whatever, you know, like Mr. Beast level size or what have you. Like, I think that would change who I was, and maybe not all for the better. Um, Tim Cook for president. Now that I'd get behind. That's what we've taken away from this. he would reduce the size of. He would remove the charge brick from your federal tax return. Something like that. Let's see. I bet you're one of the few YouTubers willing to discuss hardcore economics and politics live. Well, I feel more confident about talking about it when I don't really think that there's a good way to do it or a bad way to do it. I think that there's pros and cons to any way you do it, and it's just kind of about picking the worser of two evils. Like, it's really easy when an individual can visualize how a government or how a tax should work in their head. But once you realize the amount of systems that has to go through and what they have to do in order to get elected, to have the party, to have the power, and to have control of the House, and to have the ability to make those changes, that type of person that can get to that position and what they intended for the tax to be or how they intended the government to work is going to change and alter and get so twisted and mixed up. Yeah, it was like I just think government systems inherently are flawed. And yeah, that may be a defeatist attitude. I agree, but I do not see a clear path or a clear route to how to turn that around, you know. I don't think a revolution's a good idea. I don't think moving away and expecting that the problems will go away. That's what I've had to deal with a lot in my family. Or there's just people that don't like the laws in California, so like, oh, I'll move out of California. That way, they won't have me. They don't have the control. Like, and then a couple of years go by, and the same laws that were passed in California are passed in their state too. It's like this is a human personality flaw of like power hungry corruption, getting too much attention, too much fame, that happens in both businesses and government, and understanding that there's not a human system that is flawless is the best expectation to go into. That's why I try to be more realistic about rumors and leaks and try to lean on the side of caution and tell you guys, hey, prices might go up, and even when people disagree, or I say 120 hertz isn't coming on the iPhone 12, you know, lean on the side of caution, because that's how you won't be as disappointed, because humans are flawed. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, you can't change much by yourself. That's why the class must unite. But big crowds, big classes uniting also doesn't necessarily result in the best outcome. That's how a lot of countries are formed, is uniting against a common enemy, but then they get established and then they corrupt and result in the same exact thing. You know, that's kind of what the country was founded on in a lot of ways. We didn't like taxation without representation, and now the U.S. does very similar things. We have territories with millions of people living in them, and they can't vote, but we tax them. It's like give it long enough, live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That's what's just don't just don't trust that humans can create a flawless system. Uh, I like the one-on-one. I like the close. Like let's just make the best of it. There's hundreds of years of existence probably left, or thousands maybe, who knows. And there's probably going to be a lot of terrible things in our future and a lot of great things in our future. And the best we can do with the time we are given is just focus on the positive, be the optimistic. That's why I like the tech community. It's just what's the coolest thing we can come up with, right? Like what's the best value, what's the fastest this, what's the coolest that, and we just get to talk about how flawed or how cool we can make products that enrich people's lives and bring us closer together. So I can do streams like this and talk to you guys and that kind of thing. Um, and just try not to dwell too much on the negative, which is why I don't go into politics. Is it's pretty much all negative. It's for the most part just a bunch of they're wrong, I'm right, or they're wrong, they got this wrong, and this is flawed, and this is broken. We need to fix this. All of that you're just going to be disappointed on if you expect it to be fixed in your lifetime or you expect it to be resolved. But spending time with your family, spending time with your loved ones or people you care about, even if you don't like your family for whatever reason, I know that happens. Just finding people that you respect and care about and spending time with them. That's what you'll be grateful you did when you're old or close to the end of life. You'll wish you have spent more time with the people you care about, more so than arguing with people on the internet about how a political party should work or how laws should work. I just don't think that goes anywhere. Who will protect your revolution from the next one? Yeah, this is getting deep. Since humans are imperfect, our creations will always be imperfect. Exactly, yeah. Burkhart says, one of the few YouTubers of this size actually feels genuine, like someone you can talk to. A lot of YouTubers this size tend to think of viewers as just fans. I never want that to be the case. I mean, obviously, I can't individually meet up with all of you. That would be far too complicated and expensive, and I don't have the time for it. This is the closest thing I can get for that. But, yeah, I think a lot of channels and people even in the community that I've talked to just have more of this heightened view of themselves. Like, I am a content creator and they are all viewers and they will, I will not, communicate. Like, they didn't use this word, but I get this vibe from a lot of creators that are just like, I do not talk amongst the peasants. These are just everyday people. And I'm not going to communicate with them because they are not creators and they don't have as big a following as I have. And I just don't want that separation of class or whatever to be had. Like Indiana Jones just said, people will argue about anything. That's true. But social media is kind of rigged and designed to make your blood boil. It's kind of designed to make you angry. And I've experienced this as well. I've spent a lot of time arguing with people on Twitter and Discord, and I never feel happy by the end of it. Even if I'm right and I won the argument and the other person conceded, I never got the same feeling I do when I just spent some time with my grandma or with a friend. You know, like Josh was saying, we just need a new dynamic for social media that stops spreading divisiveness and negativity for ad revenue. I guarantee that make an enormous change. Again, you're expecting a human flawed humans to make a unflawed system. I don't think Twitter's the problem. I don't think it's social media necessarily that's the issue. It's the way social media basically enhances human behavior, and social media is an accelerator of our conversations, and it expands our reach. It makes us much louder. So when you make humans be able to reach much further, find more divisive opinions than before, and you make them much louder than before, the arguments are a human side effect. It's not a social media side effect. But social media doesn't help, is my point. Definitely doesn't stop you from finding people you disagree with. And, when you can hear, it's never been so easy to hear like 100 voices or 100 opinions all on one subject. And you can hear 90 neutral to positive opinions and then have 10 negative ones. And those negative ones now seem really, really loud. Whereas in the real world, off social media, how many people are you really going to be able to interact with? and how many really hostile, critical arguments are you going to find yourself in the real world? Probably not as many. It'll be a lot harder to find someone that disagrees. And I also think there's just something different about face to face discussion. There's just, when you know the person is sitting right next to you or standing there, like you don't attack their character, or you care a bit more about their feelings because you can see their face and you can see the emotion behind it, and you don't want them to feel disrespected. There's just kind of a natural instinct to want to keep it positive. Um, it's not social media, it's the way people conduct themselves on it. Right. That's why I don't think there's a way to fix social media. Like we need to retrain the algorithm or something and that'll make us more friendly. No, it's a human flaw. And social media just exaggerates it. My opinion, Facebook is far worse for negativity and anger than any other platform. Yeah, I don't use Facebook much, but I still see a lot of people with issues. You can't change humans easily. It's smarter to create technology that manipulates them into something productive. Yeah, I mean, again, don't assume that that's a flawless system either. But Makima says, I don't really know what we were talking about now, but good morning. Thanks, Makima. I don't think social media is worse than IRL conversations. I think it exaggerates flaws um, in human character. Like you have the same problems IRL, but social media accelerates those problems and increases the likelihood of you running into those problems. Um, but Josh commented on the post right before we wrap up. I've noticed the Apple Silicon Mac lineup has been pretty fragmented, especially with updates to new generations. Why not have a set schedule like with iPad, iPhone, and Apple Watch? Probably because it doesn't work out that great for sales. They'd rather have people buying M1 Pro MacBooks in Christmas time for full price and then have new ones come out and a whole new wave of sales comes in. Um, yeah, let's see. I can definitely say from personal experience, there's been thousands of people that will tell me horrifying things in my comments or on Twitter or online. They'll do the rudest, say the meanest, rudest things possible to you. And I've never had someone who recognized me from my videos say something bad in person. I think there's a decent chance that someone who doesn't like my content, because there's a lot of them, there's a lot of people that don't like my content, and they've probably seen me at some point in public or recognized me, and they just chose not to say anything, which I'm grateful for. Like if you don't like me, just don't say anything. Um, I don't follow some of my relatives on social media because all the content on is the negative things. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, James. Put 100 people in a room with all differing opinions, and they'll all focus on working together in common ground. Give them all a phone and Twitter, and they'll do the opposite. Yeah, I don't know about that. I think there can still be flaws with people in person, but I was just thinking of think of like any political rally, behind a big politician. When you get a bunch of crowd of people together, they can start thinking with a mob mentality, and it just goes horribly. Um, let's see. In real life, I act the same way I do on the internet. Most people can't stand me. Yeah, but you'll meet and interact with a lot more people on the internet than you will with in real life, so it accelerates the problem. Um, yeah. I also got M1 Pro and no regrets whatsoever. So yeah, that's the main takeaway. M1 Pro is the better deal. Better deal. I'm only human, of flesh and blood I'm made. We're all human, so let's just choose positivity, choose to be nice, choose to be friendly. Unless it's the 24-inch iMac, then we can hate on it. That's fine. And I appreciate your guys' super chats, and I appreciate chatting with you all. And more videos to come. Stay tuned. There will be a new video dropping in just a couple minutes. So I'll see you soon. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.